Too.
Okay, so let's get started here and saying good evening, Democrats.
Good evening, Democrats.
Democrats.
Buenas tardes,
Okay, now
demócratas.
everyone's
I
gonna
tear myself away from the State of the Union address.
exactly. You gotta tear ourselves away. Put Biden on mute for just a second. Let's try one last time so everyone can hear you. Good evening, Democrats.
Yes.
Buenas tardes, demócratas.
Democrats.
Okay, great. So now I'm going to mute everybody. Anyone can unmute themselves when they want, but I know a lot of folks are still watching the president's speech, and so we're gonna leave that going. We have our Spanish interpreter, Suzanne. Suzanne, good to see you. We'll unmute, and then. Are you connected through the interpretation system, or do we need to get you set up still?
I don't, let me see. Let me look under participants. I should be able to see it.
Or if you,
I can make an announce. Oh, I see it right here. Yeah, Spanish interpreter. It's not assigned though.
yes.
I don't know why.
How do I assign it to you? Can you send me your, wait, add. This is exciting for everybody. I
It's a
just
great feature on Zoom.
I just figured it out, so
Oh,
just gonna take
bravo.
1 second.
Just don't put don't activate the feature yet till I announce what you want me to say.
Okay.
Okay, perfect. I'll just say it right now. Para los que hablan español, vamos a tener interpretación simultánea. Si quieren escuchar, van a mirar un globo que está, un icono que van a estar ahí. Lo van a indicar que quieren interpretación en español y van a poder escuchar. Gracias. Okay, I just said if anyone wants to use the feature, you're going to activate it, and they'll just click on the little globe, and they would choose Spanish.
Okay. Señora, ¿qué es un
¿Sí?
clojo?
¿Cómo?
¿Qué es un clojo?
No, un pequeño globo, como un mapa mundi.
Oh, okay.
Va a ser como un icono que va a estar ahí.
No, es perfecto.
Gracias.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. Okay.
Okay, folks. So I just want to say it's a great time to be a Santa Monica Democrat right now. I'm going to run through some of the reasons. As we speak, President Biden is delivering his first address to a joint session of Congress, and he's making history by sharing that dais with 2 California Democratic women. We did reach out to both the president and the speaker to let them know about this meeting time. We said, hey, we called it first. We said that we were going to be meeting on the 28th. But for some strange reason, they didn't seem to care about that. So thank you to those who are here with us live, but also thank you to those who are watching this on a recording on YouTube at a later date. It's the intention of the club to make these meetings accessible to everybody, whether you can be here at 7 o'clock on a Wednesday or not. So we're really glad to have you with us here whenever you're able to watch. Here's another reason it's great to be a Santa Monica Democrat is last night, the Santa Monica City Council appointed our first ever Public Safety Oversight and Reform Commission. And I'm pleased to share that our board member, Derek Devermont, and club members Angela Scott, George Brown, Craig Miller, and Greg Moreno were each appointed to this commission. So we have very good representation from our ranks on this new commission. And just this week, our own former club president, Dr. Cheyenne Roy, announced he's running for Assembly, Richard Bloom's seat, AD 50. We're very excited to hear that news. I think I saw that he's actually here. I don't know if you want to say hello, but we're really excited that he's getting in the race.
Thanks, John. I appreciate it.
Yeah, so the club hasn't made any official announcements, but I can say for me personally, as the president, that I've taken the step of endorsing Shai for Assembly. And that means I'll be recused when the club makes its decision, but I'm so excited. Shai's been a friend of mine for almost a decade now, and I'm just so excited to support his campaign. And one more great reason, starting tomorrow, the California Democratic Convention kicks off, which is the first ever all virtual convention. So some of us are elected delegates to this convention, like me. I got my credentials right here. But we'll be talking about that in a few minutes and maybe in the next couple of meetings. We also want to let you know that you can attend a lot of the convention events. So I'm going to place a link to sign up to those in the chat in just a minute. But when you sign up to this website, it's called Hop In, that's hosting the convention. And you can actually scroll through the schedule and see all of the upcoming caucuses and events that you might want to attend. A lot of this is open to the public. Usually you'd have to travel to San Francisco or Sacramento or San Diego. This time it's going to be in your own house, sitting, you're going to be able to do all of the stuff from home. And I really recommend taking advantage of a lot of this opportunities that are coming up. On Thursday, tomorrow, there's an intensive training on justice, equity, diversity, and inclusion. The abbreviation for that is JEDI. So I'm excited to finally be able to say, to be able to get JEDI training. You can sign up for that training. I'm going to put that in the chat as well. To be able to learn more about what the party is doing, to reach out to different communities and how we can be better activists. I think that's the key, how we can be the best activists to different communities and do the best outreach that we can do. And one of the main events of the convention is the election of the new party leadership team. And at our last meeting on March 10th, we had all of the candidates who are running come by and we voted on our endorsements. And this year, the voting was done electronically. So we got the results in a few days early. And I'm pleased to share, in fact, let me share right now. Here it is. Whoops. They're the winners, preliminary results. All of the Santa Monica Dem Club endorsed candidates won their elections, including Rusty Hicks, Betty Yee, David Campos, April Verrett, and our regional director, Larry Gross. And while we didn't come to a consensus for secretary, Melahat, who won her race, was one vote ahead of her opponent when she ran for our endorsement. So I think that one vote may have tipped the balance for her as well. So we had a really good result for Santa Monica Dems and for the whole state party. It's been, a tumultuous few years. The former chair had to resign, and we've been sort of dealing with that, a lot of issues in the party, quite frankly, for a few years. And now we have this great new leadership team going. And I know our leadership here at the Dem Club is excited to work with Rusty and his team going forward. One more announcement before we dig in. Our next membership meeting is May 26th. We're going to be continuing our dialogue on some of the themes that we're talking about tonight, how to make Santa Monica governance more democratic with a small d. But next month, we'll be looking specifically at ways which we vote: ranked choice voting, proportional representation, approval voting. These are some of the topics we'll be diving into. That's Wednesday, May 26th. Now, before we get to our guest speakers this evening, we have a few club votes, some business to take care of, 2 resolutions and 2 local positions. First up is a resolution opposing the recall of Governor Gavin Newsom. Now, you may have heard that this week the recall petition officially qualified for the ballot, which means that later this year we are in fact going to have a recall election, just like the one in 2003. Hopefully we have a different outcome this time. Now let's be clear about what's going on here. This is an attempt by national Republicans to seize control of the biggest and most democratic state. The recall efforts funding is coming directly from the RNC. Its biggest public backers are Newt Gingrich, Mike Huckabee, Rudy Giuliani, although maybe he won't be involved much longer, and of course, Kevin McCarthy and Devin Nunes. They've assembled an all-star coalition of Trump supporters, QAnon truthers, anti-vaxxers, conspiracy theorists who are threatening our California values and trying to undo all the progress we've made under Governor Newsom in fighting COVID, standing with immigrants, protecting our environment, and many more. Now, I'm not here telling you the governor has been perfect, and I have my issues with some of his, the years that he's been serving. But we elected him to lead the state for 4 years, and when he's up for re-election next year is the time for us to evaluate his first term. If someone wants to primary him then, that's democracy. We'll have that discussion. But in the midst of the many different crises our state currently faces, health crisis, economic crisis, environmental crisis, there's simply too much at stake. So we need to fight hard against this recall effort. And that's why, despite their many differences, every single elected official in Santa Monica has signed on to formally oppose this Republican recall effort against Gavin Newsom. Every council member, every school board member, every rent control board member, every college board member. So with that said, the club has a resolution that we'd like to pass tonight. The board recommends passage, and I'm going to share the screen. And here we go. So this kind of sums up what we were just talking about, who is behind the recall and why it's being put together, and calling upon Democrats to unite to prevent the Republican Party from taking over California government, and standing united against any candidate who seeks this office to help Republicans succeed. And therefore be it resolved that the Santa Monica Democratic Club opposes the recall of Governor Gavin Newsom. So is there a motion to support this?
So moved.
I so move.
Second.
Second.
Yeah.
Okay, so who came on there first before
I
Peter?
don't know. I thought it was me. I'm not sure.
Ana Jara.
It was Anna. I thought I heard Anna.
Okay,
Hey Anna, how
Anna.
are you? Great to see
Doing good. Thanks, John.
Then I third.
Okay, so we have Anna. Anna makes the motion and seconded by Rayna.
I seconded, Rhina seconded,
Yeah.
Peter seconded.
Okay, so
Yeah.
Amy, you'll take your pick there, okay? And now we'll have, if there's any discussion at this point. Okay, not seeing any discussion, we'll go to a vote. So if you
John,
can,
I just have one point. This is
Sure.
Ernie. I work for a national organization called Social Security Works. And we think this is so important that we're gonna oppose it and put a lot of resources into opposing it to make sure the
Great.
senior vote, to persuade senior voters in California. And we have a huge mailing list and an email list that they vote in the correct direction. So just want to let you know that my organization, many of you have known me through that, and also I used to live in Santa Monica, is coming up full bore against this crazy
yeah.
recall. Thank you.
Janice, did you have a comment as well?
Yeah, just as a matter of pure logistics, are we going to be voting by using the reactions button and the raise hand, or the yes, no? Can you let people know early in the
Yeah,
meeting?
sure. So we would like to have you vote by using the raise hand function.
Yes.
So you should be able to, sorry, I'm trying to find it's Janet. Sorry, I'm always trying to figure out whose TV is echoing. So yeah, if you can use the raise hand function to vote yes. And if you, for some reason, can't find the raise hand function, if you just want to go like this, then I'll spot it as well.
All the transgender Americans watching at home, especially the
And
young
sorry,
people who are to
Uh,
know that your president has your back.
to Janet,
Oh,
sorry, I
man.
keep trying to find Janet. I'm gonna mute you, Janet, because I hear your TV.
Okay,
Across America.
that's okay.
To have the president, not just sort of name check you, but put it in those,
Every time I try to-
in those sort of personal guarantees of terms. I think that'll be a very powerful moment for all the scope and all of the policies that he talked tonight. That one's gonna fit.
Okay, there we go. Sorry, that was bugging me. Okay, so we have 46, 47, 48, 49 hands up. And of the people who don't have hands up, I see 1, 2, 3, 4. I see 2 more thumbs ups. So we'll say now we're at 50 now. 53 if you count the thumbs up. So Amy, are you counting this? I just want to make sure you've got it.
John, just so you can see that Tony and I are on the same
Right,
Zoom.
right,
Okay.
right. So there's at least 50 hands up plus
John, that's 2/3. 2/3 of the people roughly have their hands up. So that meets the 55% that threshold.
Sure. Well, right. Okay, great. So let's lower the, I'm gonna do it so you don't have to. So all the hands go down.
This friend John McCain, who made one of the bookends to this speech when he talks about ideologies that
We're
would
all
end up
hands-
in the
there you go.
ash.
Okay, so now okay, so now
John,
yes.
this is probably a comment that's too early, but we need to persuade the independent voters too.
On American democracy, they all wrong.
You're right. So you're right. So right now we're passing a resolution for just pertaining to this club, and we're working directly with the LA County Democratic Party and the California Democratic Party to make sure that we do that exact thing, because obviously we can't win with just Democrats. And the more important thing is that there's going to be a low turnout because it's 2021. It's an odd year. So we're going to be coordinating and working all different, mechanisms to make sure. But one thing the party asked us to do is to pass this resolution, and we've had over 2/3 of the vote was yes. So let's go to see if there's any no vote, anyone who wants to vote no. Okay, and any abstentions? Okay, so that said, it was a unanimous vote. There were about 50 to 55 votes calculated in there at least. And Amy got that written down?
I do,
Okay.
thank you.
Okay, great. And so now we will go to our next item. The next 2 items both originated from our club's Diversity and Inclusion Committee. So I'm going to introduce our Diversity and Inclusion Committee Chair, Rayna Kirkland. Rayna?
Hi, everybody. Nice to be here. Thank you, John. I just want to first of all start out by welcoming everyone to join our committee. We're right now at about 20 plus members and growing. Dawn, who's here with is our exemplary welcomer. So, we want to put out an open invitation to all of our Dem Club family here. And I also wanted to acknowledge our vice chairs who will be overseeing civic policy.
Rayna, you're breaking up just a little bit, I think.
All just committee members because of COVID, but we really want to, do more events that are much larger and extend to everyone throughout the entire Dem Club. We're looking forward to our committee picnic in July, where we're gonna get together and share some foods from all of our diverse backgrounds. And yeah, I'd like to say thank you to the Dem Club for coming up with this idea of having a diversity and inclusion committee. It means so much to so many of us in the diverse community and our allies. And I think, is Antonella here? She's our
I saw her here a second ago.
NFL Network insider Ian Rappaport reported the 49ers are.
She might be, she's a high school.
Antonella, are you here?
Yeah, I'm here. I just
There
wasn't
she
sure
is.
if I should cut.
Oh, yay. Okay, good.
Yeah.
Perfect. Thank you.
So right now I started the Santa Monica Dems Instagram, and I believe John opened or reopened the Twitter. I'm not sure on that one, but there are some posts on our Instagram, and I am starting off with like youth, reaching out to other youth, like high schoolers like myself, like seniors mostly, who can vote and don't know much about the process of voting and like what's going on in local politics. So that's the main focus for me right now. I'm going to put the our Instagram in the chat. So if anyone's interested in checking it out, we'd love some followers. Thanks, everyone.
Yay. Thank you so much, Antonella. So yeah, once again, thank you so much to the Dem Club for all of your support in having this committee. And we look forward to inviting in more members. So please reach out. Thank you.
Great. Now, do you want to introduce the resolution?
Sure. I think I'll allow Dan to do that. Is our new vice chair, Dan, are you here with us? I can't see everybody.
Yep, I'm here.
Dan Hall, fantastic. Thank you. And I'll pass the baton to you.
Hey, good evening, everyone. My name is Dan Hall, and I am the vice chair for activism of the Diversity and Inclusion Committee. So several weeks ago, on March 13th, the council passed the priorities for the current budget process. And the third budget priority was equitable and inclusive economic recovery. Sounds right and appropriate for what we as a party want. But after watching the recording of the retreat and some further discussion in the club's D&I committee, something about how the priority was framed during the discussion and then the description reading that staff had put was about access for all community members. And we felt that definition was a bit lacking and unclear, particularly when considering the distinctions between equality versus equity. And I think when listening to the recording, some of the dissenting votes on council had similar concerns. So after some discussion as a committee, we felt it was super important to be very crisp, very clear with our priority that we want equity to be the focus and not equality, equality of access, especially given our city's history with the Pico neighborhood and in Ocean Park with Belmar. And we wanted to recommend this resolution to the wider club membership to share with council what our opinion is.
So there we go. It's on the screen there. So do you want to kind of walk through it, some of the bullet points here, Dan?
Yeah. So in the whereas clauses, we're acknowledging the effects of generational and institutional racism and how that has been acknowledged by our city government and leaders in our government, calling attention to historically disenfranchised and disempowered communities of color, particularly Belmar and Pico, due to previous redlining and eminent domain actions. And then also understanding that pursuit of equity by definition requires treatment according to circumstance, which is beyond a blanket policy of equal access. John, I lost your screen.
I took it down because it was the wrong version.
No, I thought that might have been the previous one.
There we go. So this is the correct one.
There we go. And then when the exec committee amended the resolution, they added whereas a budget is a moral document, which we in the D&I committee absolutely believe. And then we make a statement that the Santa Monica Democratic Club recognizes that equity as a policy is a solution for addressing historically imbalanced social systems on our path towards sustainable justice, and that we are encouraging city staff to propose a budget that transcends equal access policies in favor of resourcing communities as required to bring us more closer to that economic justice.
Great, thanks, Dan. So I see that there's a couple hands up. We'll go to Mike first.
Yes, I just wanted to point out that one other thing, and I think it was just an oversight in the D&I committee that the exec added was religion. That's been an issue for some of us, that the bylaws of our club do not call out anti-discrimination and diversity in religion and the like. That has not been the policy in the D&I club. Its charter does include that, or I should say committee, etc. I think both it's important for us here, and I think it's important for the Democratic Party, particularly if it's going to be true to its values and also competitive politically in other parts of the country, that we show appropriate recognition that religion has also been a basis for which people have been discriminated against. So I just wanted to point out that was added as well.
Thanks, Mike. And Janice, did you have something as well?
Just want to hold this up. Can people see that? And I don't know if it's backwards for you, but
Sure, so people can see it. Go ahead.
yeah, so a lot of people may have already seen that, but the difference in equity and equality. That's it.
Okay, great. So
Let me see.
oh, hey, Maria. Yeah, did you have a
Just a clarification on Janice's, the new picture that has the 3 kids with no wall in front of it. That's equity, no wall.
Exactly.
No wall.
Right. Right. There, I have seen a lot of that, of reframing that concept to add the fact that there shouldn't even be a wall. Right. Okay, great. So I'm gonna put this back up, and then do we have a motion to pass this?
Move adoption.
I
Okay,
second.
Moved
Okay, I don't want it.
moved by Ted and seconded by, was that Maria this time, or Anna again?
Rayna, I think,
Rayna.
I don't know if anybody else. Yeah.
Okay, great.
Absolutely.
Okay, great. So any discussion? Otherwise, we'll, I see some, are those hands to vote or hands to speak? Anyone who wants to speak for the discussion, now's the time. Otherwise, we'll just go to the vote. Okay, great. So let's raise your hand if you support this passing this resolution. Okay, and we see we're at 45. Let's go back to the gallery and see everybody paging through. Okay. Any more hands that want to go up? Okay, and then we have 1, 2,
We have 52, John, of the machine.
5. I'm counting 5 additional that are not of the raised hand. So let's call that 55, Amy. Okay.
John, just wanted to let you know, I continue to press the reaction of the thumbs up because it goes down on its own after a little bit. So
okay, good. Thanks for letting me know. Okay, so now we lower all the hands. Wait, lower all hands. Okay. Now, does anybody want to vote no? Okay, not seeing any. And then any abstention? Okay, so we have another unanimous 55 vote in support of this resolution, so it passes. So congratulations. Thank you to the Diversity and Inclusion Committee and to Dan for bringing this one to us, and we're going to send it on to the council. Some of them may have just seen it here. And Now, Rayna, do you want to introduce the next item as well?
Sure. Our next item is with regards to right of return, and I'm going to actually pass the baton again to Councilmember McEwen. I believe he's here. I think I saw him earlier.
I'm here.
Perfect, fantastic. And he, came to our committee as one of our guest speakers and spoke about right of return, which we as a committee are in support of. And so I'm going to pass the baton on to you.
Well, hi there. And Santa Monica Democrats, I think we have a chance here to bend the moral arc of the universe toward justice. On May 11th, less than 2 weeks from now, at our next city council meeting, Santa Monica has the opportunity to acknowledge historic, systemic racial discrimination with a pioneering local action for restorative justice. I'm here to ask the Dem Club to support what I've called the right to return. Now, here's the background. You already heard part of the story in that last resolution. Santa Monica's Black and Brown communities were decimated decades ago by actions of our local government at the time. In the 1950s, the thriving Black Belmar neighborhood was razed. I mean, it was burned to the ground to create Santa Monica's new Civic Center. In the 1960s, the interstate highway construction ripped through the Pico neighborhood, eliminating block upon block of longstanding minority community. Now, when recently we began to build a new sports field at Pico and 4th on what used to be part of the Belmar neighborhood, the Coastal Commission required that we acknowledge the history of the site. And we've done so with wonderful historic documentation and a commemorative art installation. But I realized that we could and should do more. Many of the families who were displaced from Belmar for the Civic Center and from the Pico neighborhood for the freeway have retained their ties to Santa Monica. This is home. They have friends and relatives here. They still attend church here. And after all these decades, they still suffer the pain of being ripped out of Santa Monica. So I'm proposing something that I don't think any other city's ever done. Santa Monica should create a right to return for those families who we tossed aside decades ago. Now, Santa Monica already has an aggressive affordable housing program where we provide rent-limited, deed-restricted housing to income-qualified households who are evicted now from Santa Monica. We also prioritize those who work here now. And even after that, there does remain housing opportunity for others who qualify. Not enough for everybody in the world, certainly, but there is housing available. So over 2 years ago, I proposed that we add a new priority for our affordable housing to those we displaced from Belmar and the Pico neighborhood. It may be too little, and it certainly is too late, but this is true restorative justice. Those families and their descendants ripped out of Santa Monica would be welcomed back, given priority for affordable housing here if they income qualify. Last summer, staff provided an outline for that program that I had suggested, describing what the boundaries of the displacement area would be, how the displaced families could be identified, and suggesting how we can move forward. The council gave it conceptual approval as part of a September 8th item we had on racial equity in the Black agenda. So now we are almost at the finish line, and that's why I'm turning to you. An implementing resolution for my right to return idea will be before the council a week from Tuesday. I'm here to ask the Santa Monica Democratic Club to vote to support the right to return. And as a member, I'll make that motion.
Second.
Hi.
Thanks, Kevin. So that was a motion made by Kevin and seconded by Joel Corey. And I see there's a few hands up. So let's go to Carolyn, who I saw had her hand up first.
Oh, no, I'm just supporting.
Oh,
I'm here to support.
Okay.
I'm highly supportive. Thanks.
Okay, great. So are there any comments or questions before we go to the vote?
My hand's up, John. Ernie.
Go ahead, Ernie.
Kevin, this is really amazing. And thank you and congratulations. I moved to Ocean Park in 1973 to fight with the Ocean Park community, on behalf of the Ocean Park community as an organizer at the through the Church in Ocean Park, the Ocean Park redevelopment project. And in those days, the record of redevelopment was really, really bad for Santa Monica. As you just pointed out, the freeway there were Latino families that were kicked out of their homes. Old retired Russian Jews who'd been through World War II and the Holocaust were kicked out of their homes. Is what you're doing geographically specific, or can it apply to the people that were displaced? And I tell you that because of the Coastal Commission, we got 162 affordable units, but that still does not make up for the damage that was done to people. The two towers that were there, I forget the name of them, but they're right along Barnard Way. That happened because of that redevelopment project. We stopped a third tower and got it replaced with ultimately 161 affordable units. But I know there was that we never got sort of equal return, if you will, in terms of justice.
Thanks.
So let me try to respond to that then, if I may. After I first came up with this idea, I became aware there's Ocean Park. There's all the Japanese families were forced out into internment during World War II. This started out as an action to be taken because these two displacements came about specifically through government action and eminent domain. I believe Ocean Park was a real estate development the city had to entitle, but I don't think the city went in an eminent domain. I'd have to go back and look.
Yeah, they did. They used it to get those people out.
Then what we may want to do, if this does pass and works, is look to expand it. And I'd be very open to that. I'm the first to admit this is too little, too late, and maybe even too narrow. It doesn't redress all the grievances and all the unfair discriminatory things that have happened over the years, and it doesn't cure cancer, but it does something, and I think we need to do something now.
Thank you.
Thanks, guys. So is there anyone who wants to make a comment before we go to the vote?
I just have a question.
Sure.
Does it include the children of the families?
Yes, what staff came back with is a way to track those families. Obviously, the people who were evicted in the 1950s are at least as old as I am and maybe gone, but their children and grandchildren would be eligible for this. So we're bringing back the families is what we're doing. You know, Santa Monica used to be about 10% Black. And it was things like what we did at Belmar in the Pico neighborhood that reduced that population to 4%. If we really want to be serious about a Black agenda, we need to restore our Black community.
Thanks, Kevin. So now I see there's a couple hands up. Dolly, it looks like you've got a question.
I just want to say that in a discussion that I had with some members of our board, it was pointed out that there are folks now who cannot make their rent and are in danger of losing their homes, their apartments, and that perhaps they should share the priority with the folks who have the right to return. And that this be considered, because although I really doubt there'll be a great flood of folks on the right to return, because at least 2 generations have passed since then, and things are different for folks. But there may be so many people who really come forward. And I definitely think we should also, if we give these folks priority, which they deserve, that we also keep the priority there for those who are resident Santa Monicans now who are in danger of losing their apartment because they're paying high rent and they qualify for affordable housing. So it's
Dolly, I did mention this and maybe you missed it. We do have existing priorities for Santa Monica residents who lose their housing through no fault of their own. That wouldn't be changed.
Okay, that I wanted to be sure that that stayed in place.
And I think there's one more question from Angela. Go ahead.
Hi, yes, thank you. I'm so excited again to hear about our right to return. And I think I posed this question to you, Mayor, Councilmember McHugh and Kevin, maybe last month or so, but I would be really interested to see a formal apology from the city of Santa Monica for our historical racist past, and that would cover everyone that has been affected by that. I think that would bode well and be wonderful with the right to return announcement as well, as to have this formal apology. Cities across the nations are doing this right now. And I mean, we are one of those that is progressive, and I can see us doing that same thing. So I would love to see that occur.
I'll tell you right now that when this item comes before the council on the 11th, the first 2 words out of my mouth are going to be, "I'm sorry."
So I think that Angela was talking about a formal apology. I
Oh
mean,
yeah, I'm talking like a written proclamation.
Right, we have a number of council members on this call, and
right.
that would have to be done by the council. So I'm not sure it's appropriate to discuss it while we have a majority here under the Brown Act. This, what I'm talking about tonight is already on the agenda. This is a public meeting called by another group. So I don't want to have an internal discussion with our council members.
No, that's fine. I just wanted to put it out there and you'll probably get some letters.
Thanks, Angela. So we'll go to the vote unless there's any more questions, specifically questions on this. Tara?
I have a comment.
Okay, so Tara's hand went up. Do you want to go ahead?
Okay, yeah, I think it's a good idea, but and I haven't seen the motion yet, but a couple things to consider. I also wanted to echo what Angela said about a formal apology, and also to think about, this a little bit more holistically. So would this only be a priority for affordable housing, or would there be a way that there could be some kind of ordinance for market rate housing to get people a priority in that, or in home ownership? Or is it, I guess, something to think about. Is this only going to be for priority for affordable housing is one thing. And then the other thing I would ask is, has the council conferred with the Black agenda and also with the Latino community? Like, in other words, to talk to the 2 groups who have been affected by the displacement to make sure that you get their buy-in on this. I mean, I support it. Obviously, you want to do this, right? But I just, would like to make sure that it's done thoughtfully.
Okay, multiple questions are always tricky, but I'll do my best to remember. I'm sorry, what was your first question? Oh, whether we would extend it to other types of housing besides affordable. Tara, as you know, we maintain with you a list of affordable housing units. We do not currently have that kind of mechanism for market rate. If we found there was demand through this program for people who perhaps didn't income qualify for affordable and were looking for market rate, we could think of some kind of communication tool if we need to. It's not part of what's been proposed so far. Let me again stress, this is a start. This is a beginning. No city that I know of has ever done anything like this. I hate to admit that in over 20 years on the council, I've had so few absolutely original ideas that this stands out. But this is really, as far as I know, the first time anybody's tried this. So, we can't go too big at first until we see if the fundamental idea works. And then your second question, Tara, I'm sorry, but multiple questions are tough.
I'm sorry about that. Yeah, I just wondered if you had conferred on how to structure this with the Black community.
And in fact, there's an internal group, GARE, within the city that is dealing with equity issues. And they were fundamental in preparing the report that I talked about that was on our agenda back in September as part of the Black agenda item.
Great, thank you.
Sure. And hi, Tara. I would also just add that we have, some members of the Black agenda, including myself, who are part of the Diversity and Inclusion Committee.
Okay, and I know Mike had a comment, so.
Well, I guess it's a question. So both at the D&I committee, where I attended and voted for this resolution, and at the executive board, where I voted to recommend to the membership, the decision was made to discuss that we were voting in support of the right to return, but we were not taking on the question of the precise way that priority would work with existing priorities. And I guess I want to confirm whether that is still the intention. And I only raise that because there's no question in my mind that this is a great idea. And I think, Kevin deserves a tremendous amount of praise for leading this issue for a long time and really making it happen. And I think it ties directly into issues of equity in our schools and other things, et cetera. But I do think that the question of whether, for example, our low wage workforce, whether all of those people should be behind this priority or there should be some paralleling for some of the issues that Dolly raises, a very difficult public policy question when you move from, the general principle to the specifics. So I'm totally for the general principle, and I just want to understand, is that still our intention to only vote on that tonight?
The motion I made, Mike, is for support in concept, and that's of necessity because I haven't seen the staff report or the wording of the resolution yet, nor do I have any way to predict what the discussion of the council on the 11th will lead to in terms of details. So you're absolutely correct. This is a request for support in concept of the right to return.
Okay, well, I think this is great, and I'm hoping we'll have a unanimous vote.
Thanks, Mike. And I see Leslie Lambert has a question.
Hi, I just want to make sure I understand. I think someone made it clear that we're talking about the right of return for people who are income eligible for occupancy and 100% projects, right?
That's correct.
So you basically have to be low income or very low income to qualify for this program.
To qualify for the existing affordable housing programs we have, which include both 100% affordable subsidized and inclusionary units.
I know. Okay, great. Thank you.
Including up to moderate, Leslie. We do have some moderate housing.
Okay, thanks.
Okay.
John, just one more question.
Sure. Yeah.
I just wanted to make sure, because I know it was raised in the chat, that it also includes all the families that were displaced, all the Mexican and and African-American families that were displaced as a result of the I-10 freeway.
Yes, I spoke of that in the presentation, and I confirmed for somebody that because the people who are actually alive at the time of the displacement may no longer be alive or wish to return, this includes their descendants. We want to bring back those families, those communities of color.
Yeah, I just happened to be one of the children from that family. I was displaced. I was on Euclid in the middle of the freeway. My mom's still alive and she's 91, so.
Well, if this passes, she can come home.
Anna, go ahead. Yeah.
I'm sorry. I just wanted to let you know, as one of the original writers, along with Kevin McEwen, that brought this, I think it was a little bit over a year and a half ago that we brought it first to council. I know that was actually our concept to begin with, that this was what we wanted to make sure, that we looked at all of those people that were displaced and the families that were displaced because of the 10 freeway. And of course, that does include, I don't know, I believe it was everyone that was displaced, mostly, our African Americans and our Latino community members. However, we did have some Japanese families that were also displaced. So I believe that was the intent. Anyone that was displaced back, because of the 10 freeway. And Angela, I just wanted to let you know that I believe that in the Juneteenth celebration following this request, Kevin and I actually both got up and spoke about it. And that was actually one of the first sentences that came out from Kevin's mouth was, "I am truly sorry." So I know that doesn't count for anything, but this was at Virginia Avenue Park during the Juneteenth celebration. So I wanted to make sure, Angela, that you were aware of that, just in case you weren't there. You probably will see it on one of the videos from then. And Kevin, again, thank you for your leadership and thank you for your thoughtfulness.
Great. Thank you, Anna. So now I think we'd like to go to the vote.
I have a really quick question. I'm sorry, John.
Sure.
I hope there's not an echo in here. Do you guys hearing an echo?
You're good.
Okay. And thank you for your leadership, Councilmember Kewen, and also former Councilmember Anahara in reviewing these items some years ago. That really speaks to your, humanity and your level of governance. I'm curious about a couple of things, and one of them is relative to how some of the other municipalities that are here in Southern California have looked at these issues of eminent domain that have occurred with infrastructure development in the past, and specifically how the city of Manhattan Beach is managing their issue with respect to this, and can we consider the staff report in looking at other cities and other best practices that have been put in place with respect to this? And secondly, I thought I heard it described that the staff report has not been viewed, or is the staff report available to look at with respect to the fleshing out of the initial concept of the council member relative to the right of return? Is that staff report available to be?
Okay. What is available, Keith, at the moment already is the staff report from the September 8th item on equity. And it includes an appendix that outlines staff's work on this program. What I don't have and won't have until sometime early next week is the actual text of the resolution that will be before the council. And that's our usual procedure. We don't get the staff report till about a week before the meeting. As for Bruce's Beach and Manhattan Beach, that has become very much better known it's a bit over 2 years since I first came up with this idea, and it's been written up in the Times. And I think what's notable there is the comments from the Manhattan Beach City Council members are nowhere near as open-hearted as what I'm hearing from my colleagues in Santa Monica. I think we really do have the opportunity to lead by example on this. I am not aware of any other cities along the freeway right-of-way or other cities who may have done eminent domain on what had been thriving minority neighborhoods that are discussing this yet, but I'll bet they're going to be.
Thank you again for your leadership on this, and perhaps as we continue to move forward here in Santa Monica in this way, that perhaps we can have dialogue with, either the League of Cities or something like that to further this kind of deep humanist policy and move that forward, at least in the state of California. So thank you again for your leadership.
Just one reason we can be proud to be Santa Monicans.
One of many. So I'd like to call the vote now if we can. So if all in favor, please raise your hand. Go to the gallery again, see all those hands going up.
The threshold number is 45, and at this time there are 47 votes on the machine, plus the people who are raising their hands in person.
Right. So we so let's say we got one. I see 1, 2, 3 hands that are kind of in person. So let's say that's 51 votes. Okay, so now we'll lower the hands. I got them all down. Okay, now hands keep going up. Okay, all the hands are down. Now, anybody who wants to vote no on supporting this item? Okay, and not seeing any. Are there any abstentions? Okay, great. So we have another unanimous vote of support. So thank you so much, Councilmember McEwen, and we look forward to supporting it. And you can count on me calling in again to voice our support.
Thank you all very much.
Thank you. And so now we're going to go to our next item. We're returning to a theme we discussed earlier, which is the recall efforts. And not only is Gavin Newsom facing a recall, but other elected officials around the state are facing similar threats. Our endorsed district attorney, who we fought hard to elect last fall, George Gascon, is facing a recall threat from those who don't like his reform proposals. And recently, we've learned that 4 members of our own school board here in Santa Monica, Malibu, are facing a recall threat. The 4 board members who are facing a recall are Maria Leon Vasquez, John Keene, Lori Lieberman, and Richard Tavilder and Jess Wayne, all 4 of whom this club endorsed in their last election. After reviewing the case for the recall, our executive board voted unanimously 12-0 to recommend to the membership that this club take a formal position to oppose the recall. And we've invited a special guest to come make the case for just a few minutes, Senator Ben Allen. Senator, are you here?
Yeah, hi, John. Hey there, everybody. And so great to see everyone as always. And great evening so far. I mean, Joe Biden's speech earlier tonight and getting to see him up there with Kamala and Nancy Pelosi. What a breath of fresh air after Trump and Paul Ryan and Mike Pence, and the bold agenda that he's been able to pursue. It just makes me so grateful that we all worked so hard to get him and Harris elected and win back the Senate and everything else. So look, I wanted to just come on today and express my opposition to the recall. I think everybody knows that I served on the school board in Santa Monica, Malibu for some time. I actually served with Maria and with Lori, and I know Richard and John well. Honestly, serving on the school board was a frustrating experience. I was serving during a difficult economic downturn, certainly not as difficult as the last year has been. But serving on the board is difficult because you're really constrained. So much of the governance structure is kind of already established under education code. There's not a lot of discretion. There's a structure involving support for the superintendent that I think left someone like me frustrated at times. But I really did. I got a deep appreciation for the people who try really hard to make sure that the district is a good place that raises that provides a good education for our kids, and we've got a caring board that oversees this district and works really hard under difficult circumstances to make sure that the ships are running on time. And it's absolutely right. This group was all these members have been endorsed by this club in the past. 2 of them, in fact, the board was just reelected with a very healthy margin at the last election. And that was the same election, of course, when the Santa Monica electorate was not feeling very pro-incumbent. Unfortunately, I see my good friend Ted here. I mean, I think this was not an electorate that was afraid to turf, elect people out of office on the city council level, and yet they re-elected the incumbents of the school board by a healthy margin. We have our 2 other members who are up for re-election just next year. I think that in the end of the day, you've got to have a really strong reason to take people out of office midway. If you go back and you look at the history of the recall, there really is, the people who established the recall under the state constitution wanted, they wanted voters to be very circumspect, and it really was supposed to be during when there were evidence of malfeasance or very serious violations of campaign promises. And in the end of the day, the critiques that have been made of the board were critiques actually made during the last election, and yet the electorate looked at those critiques and reelected the incumbents. And if anything, things have actually gotten significantly better since the November election. The schools are reopening. It's not been an easy process, of course. I actually moderated a panel that the district put on talking about the challenges of reopening. But I think the board has done the reopening, managed the reopening as best they can while respecting the needs of our teachers and our staff and our students to be safe. It's been a smooth, relatively smooth process. As I say, not easy, and actually a number of other districts in my area have really struggled in the reopening process. So from my perspective, we've got a group of people who, I don't always agree with, right? I mean, we've got 4 different people. They don't always agree with each other. But the question we have to ask ourselves is this really the right way to go about doing politics in our town? Do these people, do the acts of our colleagues on the school board, really reach this extraordinary level where we're gonna go out of order? We're gonna break with the traditional voting process, the electoral process, go to a special election, which of course we know is typically a lower turnout election. And have they done something that really merits throwing them out? And I just don't see the case. I've been reading the materials. I just don't see the case. And there's a lot of complicated things happening right now. The breakup with Malibu, incredibly difficult, incredibly fraught, incredibly complicated. I think that our board has actually been standing up for the district and for all kids, has certainly been standing up for the Santa Monica community in an appropriate way. Well, they've certainly been willing to give give more money per pupil, agree to a deal that would involve more money per pupil for a long time for the students from Malibu. I think they're taking a firm and difficult stand during a very difficult negotiation. So I just don't see the case. And if anything, I think that we've got in these 4, and I think in the other board members as well, caring people who are trying their best under difficult circumstances to look out for the young people of Santa Monica and Malibu. I just think this is a mistake. I think this is a mistake. I think that the regular election process is the time to have these discussions. And I think it's going to become an additional distraction that's going to take up a lot of money and a lot of time at a moment when we need to come together to figure out this Malibu negotiation, to figure out a smooth reopening, and to figure out how we emerge from this pandemic stronger than before. And so I have to say that I oppose this effort. And I think that the club ought to as well. I understand people are very frustrated. It's not been an easy time for anybody. And I encourage anybody who's upset, run for office next year. There's an election next year. Challenge any of us, challenge me, challenge the board, challenge the council. We have a robust electoral process that we all engage in. And, look, and I see Oscar here. Oscar challenged the council. He got elected. He's now serving our city on the council. So that's really, I think that's where our energies ought to go. Let's get our schools reopened. Let's do it in a safe way. Let's get back on track, and let's focus on coming together as Santa Monicans and as Democrats, both this year and into the next year as we go into the election season. So I'm going to vote against this recall, both on the ballot, and I'm certainly encouraging my fellow club members to do the same for the purposes of this club's position.
Thank you so much, Senator Allen. Appreciate you coming by. And I just wanted to now, before we move forward, create the opportunity. I timed Senator Allen's speech was just under 7 minutes.
I'm sorry.
So, no, it's good. If there's anybody here who has the other position, who believes that we shouldn't oppose the recall, or even further thinks that we should support the, you know what I'm saying? Either we should support the recall or that we shouldn't take the position tonight to oppose the recall, please raise your hand. And I reached out to some people who were reaching out to me in advance and let them know that we would make this opportunity. So is there any club member who would like to speak on the other side? Okay, I'm just taking a look to see if anyone's raising their hand. Okay, Oscar, yeah, sure, go ahead.
Yeah, John, I'm not, speaking for the other side, but I think it would be great to have both sides come forward. And I don't know if you did do the outreach to the other side and they, refuse to give a presentation, then I respect that. But I think important, for the club to have integrity and to, have a robust debate, have both sides explained. I'm sure there's reasons for the recall. This is a historic recall. From my understanding, it's never happened before. So it's important. It's important for our community to understand what's going on. And elected officials, I think, have to hear those concerns, regardless if the recall goes forward, if it fails. I think it's an important moment for our community to understand what's going on and how we can make things better. I support the idea of having both sides. So I don't know if that's a possibility. And also, is there a way to separate there's the Gascon issue, right? And then there's a school board issue. Are you bringing both of those together in one vote, or are they going to be voted separately?
Sorry if that wasn't clear, just to that last point of your question, Oscar. This is particularly a motion to oppose the school board recall. The Gascon issue, we'll probably revisit that if that starts to gain more steam, but right now we're discussing that one. Dami, I see you have your hand up. Go ahead.
I want to ask Councilmember Delatorre, do you know of any reasons as to why this is so heated? Because we've been looking around and asking, and I've been reading as much as possible and trying to find out, and I'm trying to engage. I mean, literally, are people committing crimes? I mean, is it really to the point where we got to pull people out during, I mean, they could just go run next year. I mean, it's one more year. I mean, where are these people? What is it? Do you know of anything? Can you please let us know? Somebody, anybody here? We did invite people, but nobody's here.
Right. So, I mean,
Yes.
Yeah, go ahead, Oscar. If you want to respond to that, go ahead.
Yeah, there are parents that are obviously involved, and they've listed a list of issues, a long list of issues, some involving crimes that have been committed. I mean, that's been public, and some of those things have received press, and then other things that haven't seen the light. But there's some credibility to some of the allegations, and I think if you bring those parents forward, they would have that information and detail that information. But
we're here. I mean, they can.
There are real
Okay, so just to go through the process here, I just wanted to let everybody know, a person who's not a member of this club reached out with some concerns about the board. I heard her out on the phone. I let her know that the way that this club operates is members of the club are given standing to make any case that they like to make. And we're completely open right now. If any member of the club would like to make that case, like I said, they can have equal time to Senator Allen. But right now, I mean, we are a club, we have members, and the question now comes, if the club is interested in making this vote, then it should be entitled to do so. But I'm open to hearing. There's other hands up. So I think what we should do is just take a few questions, and then we'll call for the motion. So I see Joe Pertel, your hand is up. Let's go to you first.
Great, thank you. Mr. Delatorre, when a person claims in public that somebody's committed a crime, that's a very serious allegation, and you're repeating allegations that crimes have been committed. I've taken a look at the recall proponents website. I've looked for the names of the people who are running that organization, and there's nobody listed. Could you tell us who are the people behind this recall effort, because they don't put their names up on the website, and what are the crimes specifically? Thank you.
Yeah, I'm totally prepared and focused on the presentation that I have later on in the meeting. That's not my focus right now, but I'm sure that if you do the proper outreach to these parents, that these parents are prepared to come forward to bring that information forward.
But you've stated tonight, though, that their crimes have merit. And I'm just wondering, since you appear to have more information than at least I do, and I feel like I try to be relatively informed. I haven't seen any evidence. I know that there have been allegations against at least one individual, which is patently false. But I'm just wondering, I mean, could you just give us sort of an overview, just even if it's, very brief, what the allegation of criminal activity is? It's a very serious allegation you're making,
And
or
yes,
somebody's making.
You did say they commit crimes. So you did say it. So can you enlighten us a little bit? Like
Just generally.
Are.
Yeah. I mean, just generally, board members have voted for contracts that they are either them or their spouses are benefiting from financially. And so those are some allegations that have come out publicly in the newspapers. The LA Times did a story. I was even implicated in that allegation as well. And so those matters have surfaced. They actually did occur. The school board had reports and so forth on that. So I mean, I don't want to go into the details of all of that, you know, but you can read it, you know, it was very public. And then there's some that aren't very public that parents have alleged as well. And so I think it's better to have them
allegations.
come forward.
I mean, they're allegations. I mean, if it's a crime, then it should be go to court, and then we should, as voters, say, yeah, you know what, our elected members were committed crimes, and then yeah, we should recall them. I mean, let's put this stuff on the table here, and if you know stuff, get them here and let's talk about it, because this is just ridiculous. We're doing this during COVID. Shouldn't we be focused on opening a school?
So with due respect, Dami, I think we just need to move on with time. So I want to take just one more question. I see Leslie Lambert has her hand up, but she hasn't spoken yet. So let's go.
Thank you, John. I have actually 3 points, and hopefully I can remember the third one. If the mismanagement being alleged is at all true, I would like to know, to my knowledge, there's never been negative audit findings from the state for the district. And you guys can correct me if I'm wrong, but I've never heard of such a thing. Furthermore, the district has a AAA bond rating, which is not easy to have. And if there's malfeasance going on at the district level, they would not have a AAA bond rating. And number 3, the allegations others are making about improper contracting, I believe that's going through the proper legal channels. It's not that it's not being addressed, but it is being addressed. So, I mean, I consider this so unbelievably slanderous. It's really hard for me to even talk about it. I mean, there's absolutely zero evidence that I have seen over the years of the school district acting in inappropriate, the school board acting in inappropriate ways.
Okay, so in the interest of time, I think we're going to go to the vote. Again, I'm just going to offer one more time. Is there anybody who would like to make more of a case as to why we should vote no here? You know, you have the opportunity.
Both recalls, John?
What's that?
This vote on both recalls?
This is the vote on the school board recall for 4 members.
Okay, thank you.
It's going to, but to clarify on that point, it's one vote to oppose the recall of all 4 of the incumbents who are being threatened with that recall.
I move that we support the measure.
Second.
So moved by Joel and seconded by Janice. Okay.
It means that
And
you're opposed.
yes, a yes vote right now means you oppose the recall. And more specifically, it means that you support the Democratic Club opposing the recall.
Exactly. Okay. We raise our hands.
The hands are going up. Okay, we're at 52. With 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, so let's call that 50. Let's call that 57. Okay, and we'll lower all the hands.
We needed 47 affirmative votes, and we got 57 before, as you move on.
Thanks. So that would assume that all participants in the Zoom are registered members, though, right? So the number might be lower. So now, are there anybody who'd like to vote no?
John, I want to abstain from this vote.
Okay, thanks. So we'll have 1 abstention. Well, are there any other abstentions besides Oscar? Amy, are you abstaining or raising your hand? Sorry, I wanted you to clarify. Nothing. Okay. Okay, so we have 1 abstention. So the vote passes. about, what did you have, Amy? 57 to 0 to 1? Okay, great. So thanks, everybody. And
John,
now
were there any votes in favor? And against?
there were no votes. There were no votes against.
There were none. Thank you for telling me, for letting everyone know that.
Yes. So now I know everybody, I know we're running a little bit behind schedule here but you know, we're having fun, so it's okay. We want to go to our next item. This is the final item before we get to our guest speakers. So we're going to go to one more proposed resolution brought to us by two friends of the club, Wayne Liebman and Leonora Kamner. And since we haven't announced this resolution text in advance, per our bylaws, right now we're just hearing the presentation, and we're going to actually vote on it next month. So this is just hearing the presentation. So Wayne and Leonora, take it away.
I don't think I have screen share.
It's coming. Hold on.
Okay, there it is. Okay, thank you. Okay, so in California, how does an initiative become a law? First, an initiative is crafted, signatures are gathered, and then whoever floods voters with their preferred messages wins. This is a problem. Today, I'm going to present an alternative to this misinformation-prone system and how we can bring that change. The initiative process was designed in 1911 for ordinary voters to address issues the legislators were ignoring. But now it's become a tool of moneyed interests. And initiatives are increasing in number and complexity. This has been accompanied by an infusion of partisan advertising, which instead of educating voters, in many cases promotes confusion and misinformation. A recent poll conducted by the Public Policy Institute of California showed that 90% of Californians believe that the initiative process is controlled at least in part by special interests. So let's talk about Prop 22, which you are all likely familiar with. It was paid for by Uber and Lyft and designed to benefit them financially. This is a direct quote from the voter pamphlet sent out to all registered voters in the 2020 election concerning Prop 22. Note here that the pamphlet says 80% worked under 20 hours a week. Opponents of Prop 22, among whom the California Federation of Labor was one, spent $20 million. Here you can see from this text on the voter pamphlet that 70% of drivers work 30 or more hours a week. So we have 70% working more than 30 hours and 80% working less than 20 hours, and that doesn't make sense. The information here adds up to 150% of the drivers, and that doesn't even include the drivers who work between 20 and 30 hours. So this is just one example of misinformation out there, but you know, this is a really big problem, larger than just this one example. Ultimately, Prop 22 won because of money. And even though it was a complex legal issue with major implications for the state, you know, people were not educated on the issues. Voters received misinformation and propaganda. Honestly, it was the ballot measure results in 2020 that really got me very involved with this issue. It's just a total disaster. So what if there was a way for a diverse cross-section of the state to come together to educate themselves on the issues, discuss, and deliberate on an initiative? The CIR process provides a mechanism for a more informed, equitable initiative process. There's a successful example of this in Oregon, established 10 years ago. The Oregon CIR gathers a paid random sample of the state's electorate to scrutinize statewide ballot measures. They first undergo training in dialogue, deliberation, and bullshit detection techniques to prepare for study and deliberation on the policy issues raised by the measure. Campaign advocates present for and against the measure, and they make their case, and they're questioned by the citizen panelists. Additionally, independent experts provide information and respond to requests and questions from the panel. So it's very similar to a jury. Then the panelists deliberate and produce a 750-word statement that contains key facts, the best reasons to vote for the measure, and the best reasons to vote against the measure. The statement is published in the official voters pamphlet, which is distributed to every Oregon household that has one or more registered voters. This graphically represents the process. There are 24 people chosen by lot. They work for 4 days and are paid for their time. They produce a 750-word statement that every voter gets. They don't do every initiative. They only do the controversial ones, which is defined by polling, money spent, whether it's high profile or whether it will impact the state budget. The panel represents a cross-section of the state. They do a stratified random sample, so the panel reflects the composition of the whole state as to age, gender, race, and ethnicity. Also geographic distribution, voter frequency, educational attainment, and political party. The panel sessions are public and transparent, but the full names of the panel and their hometowns are not public. This is a statement crafted by a panel from a pilot program that was done in California. The top section describes the process. The next section presents the key findings of the panel, starting with the most important, what the initiative would actually do. The bottom left column has the 3 strongest reasons to vote for it and why they're important. On the right, the 3 strongest reasons to vote against the measure and why those are important. We need your help to stop more disinformation campaigns and bring more fairness, equity, and inclusion into the ballot measure process. Please vote to endorse the Civic Initiative Review to make sure voters get all of the facts that they need for future initiatives.
Thank you, Leonora. So let's see this. I see Patricia's hand is going up. Do you have a question?
I have 2 questions. If we don't know the names or where the people are from, we can't evaluate them as to their integrity and whether in fact they're representing us properly. And the other thing is, are you trying to say that you want to take all money out of the politics so nobody can do their own advertisements, nobody can spin the truth, nobody can lie in commercials? I mean, how are you going to get rid of the things that people listen to rather than the voter pamphlet, which they don't read?
Leonora, should I take that one?
Yes.
This program has been studied for 10 years in Oregon. Every Citizens Initiative review there has been evaluated by an independent panel. The results are on the internet. It turns out that voters don't particularly read the paid for statements, the ones that come from the partisans, but they do read the statements that come from these panels, and they have had increasing effects. And that's been studied, and the voters are more confident and more likely to vote as a result of this program. The reason that the names are kept out of the public is because they don't, the same thing as a jury, they don't want advocates to come after these people. But we do know that the public has responded positively to it, and it is a cross-section. It is a randomized cross-section of people in the state. It's just like a jury. So you might ask that question of a jury too. How do we know that the jury has integrity? So that's kind of the short answer to that.
Thanks, Wayne. And Amy?
Thank you very much for recognizing that this is actually something we do need to address. I know that the League of Women Voters has been very involved in helping to write initiatives, and the language is very, very important. I know that there are laws now that exist in ballot measures that require a positive for means that you're accepting the initiative, and against means you're refusing the initiative. That hadn't existed before. But I am wanting to ask is specifically, what are you asking from us? Support of a concept, or are we looking at you're putting initiative out? I think that the oversight needs some structure before people just allow themselves to say that this group of people can act on our behalf if there isn't something that already is kind of thought out. I think that's the idea is fabulous, but there's a little bit of vagueness in the details, and I'd like more information if you have it.
we've written a resolution for the Democratic Party. It's called Citizen Statements on Ballot Propositions. And we're asking the club's endorsement for this resolution. That's all we're asking at this point. No bill has been written that, we want to have this resolution that the Democratic Party supports the idea of the bill. And I had forgotten to answer one of the previous questions. Why, is this going to limit advertising? You can't do that until we get a constitutional amendment that says corporations are not people and they're not entitled to First Amendment speech protections. You're going to get a lawsuit every time you try to limit that. So what we're trying to do is to counteract some of the poison by giving people a dose of easy to understand truth that it comes from voter peers.
Okay, thanks, Wayne. So let's go to Peter.
Yeah, I have many of the same concerns that have already been talked about, but I'm wondering, is there any way to force the participants to use facts? I mean, can they be sued for lying?
Well, anybody can sue anybody, I suppose. This process is monitored very carefully and watched, and I could refer you to the website. These panels have been run by a group called Healthy Democracy in Oregon, and you can study what they've come up with. You can read some of the statements and the reasoning behind it. Again, it's like a jury. So, can you sue a jury? It's a randomly chosen cross-section of citizens, and it's a very carefully structured process that allows them to deliberate together and listen to all sides and take in all the information and ask experts and have the experts testify. And then they just come up with the facts. They don't come up one way or the other. They say, okay, we understand this initiative now. We've listened to it. All right. And this is what it is. This is what it would do. This is 3 reasons.
Yeah, I'm not talking about them. I'm not talking about your jury. I'm talking about the people like Uber and Lyft who just flat lied to us about that. It
would be
the corporations.
The bill hasn't been written. It would be really interesting and great if we had a bill that said this citizen statement is the only thing that's going to be in the voter pamphlet, and we're not going to take that advertising at all, pro or against. But that's something that the state legislature is going to have to consider if we get a bill and when it goes before it.
Great. So let's go to Aura really quick. Oh, you're muted.
Hey, yes, I wanna commend you for this effort. It's so necessary, and I'm gonna just share what I went through as a candidate and as a candidate for office and post candidate. It's the real problem here is the influence of money and special interest on elections, because even if you curb and control the pamphlets also are run by private companies. I could have, if I wanted to, as a candidate, subscribe to a menu of different pamphlets that have nothing to do with the Democrats or with this or with that or anything. And they're just private companies that subscribe you to something that looks like something official. So because people get so much mail around elections, and because you can't control those because of freedom of speech and the First Amendment, and because we also have independent expenditures, I'm afraid that your effort might not get you to where you want to be. So it's both. It's both things. So I really hope that you go far with this, because I experienced it, myself. Personally, I experienced it where people said things that weren't true about me, and they were out there, and voters got, information that was misinformation. But again, it's really hard, because even me as a candidate or as a yeah, even me, if I wanted to send all of the people in my area a mailer or a pamphlet with information, I can really say whatever I want. So I mean, like I said, I really hope that you succeed, but I think this is beyond the pamphlets. I think is the issue of freedom of speech, which is not an issue, but is an issue sometimes for us. And the fact that we have some campaigns that have unlimited money and they can subscribe to all of these things and say whatever they want, and there's no checks and balances.
Well, this, of course, is designed as a check and balance. It's not something that gets sent out like campaign advertising. It goes in the official voter pamphlet.
Great. So thank you so much, Wayne and Leonora, for coming, and for everybody who asked questions. And what we're going to do is send this back out, the information back out to the membership over the course of the next few weeks, so that on May 26th, we'll have our final vote to support it. But we certainly look forward to joining some of the other Democratic clubs like West LA. Who else has supported it? Pacific Palisades?
Pacific Palisades supported it. Westchester Playa, I think, supported it. We have 3 districts that have supported it. And there's a 4th club that supported it. I'd have to check my records, but yeah, the response has been really, really positive. Yeah.
Great. Thank you so much. And Patricia, did you have a comment?
I'm sorry, just a quick, how is the random sample of Californians selected? Do they have to apply, or do they have to be voters? I mean, how, I don't see how you can find a random sample of Californians that is large enough to be accurate and small to represent everyone, and small enough to fit into a room.
Well, there's a short answer to that. They do a stratified random sample, so that they do it randomly, but they select from the different groups that matter. And if you have, like, say, purple people and mostly purple people, and then there's polka dot people and not very many polka dot people, they make a bucket of the polka dot people and a bucket of the purple people, and they take out and they randomly select from each bucket the proportional number of people. That's just a simplified answer of how stratified randomization works. They've been doing it in Oregon. They have it down to a science. It's very precise, and it's been working. So it can be done, but the ideal, you're right, the bigger is better. That actually a group of 30 is probably a really good size, but you can do it with a group of 30.
So Wayne, before you go, I want to follow up on that for 1 minute. It's Sue Himmelrich. And apart from the random sampling, does the same group do the work on every ballot measure?
It would be a different group. There would be one group per measure. The cost is roughly $120,000 to do one measure. So you don't do every measure, and there would be a group for the measures that were selected, a different group for each measure that is selected. So
that was my real question: whether
the
group did one group did all of them, or if there were different groups on different ones.
There would be different groups. It's a 4-day process for each one. If you did 10 propositions, it would cost about $1.2 million to do that. The state would have to budget for it. That's in contrast to the $780 million spent on the propositions by advocates in the 2020 election.
But wait, Wayne, why wouldn't they still spend the money? All you're doing is adding something to the pamphlet. Nothing is stopping the IEs, the advertising, and that $780 million.
No, you can't stop that.
So this isn't eliminating that. This is just neutralizing it.
This is attempting to neutralize it. It's fighting it with truth. Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay, so thanks everybody. We are going to move on. We're running quite behind. So the next item is, very quickly, Amy, if you don't mind just running through the secretary's report. These are votes that the executive board of the club took in the course of the last month, virtually and at our board meeting, and then we're going to go to our guest.
Okay, I'm going to run these by very quickly. These are just being reported to our general membership. We had a motion to approve the minutes of our Santa Monica Democratic Club Executive Committee. There was made by Michael, seconded by Janine, moved to adopt the minutes, 10 yes, 1 no, and 1 abstention. The motion passed. Number 2, the Santa Monica Executive Board is presented with a resolution to oppose the recall of Governor Newsom. Motion made to accept the resolution as amended. I made the motion, Peter seconded, 12 yes, 0 no's, 0 abstentions. It was passed unanimously. The third motion was Executive Board hear the commitment to equity and budget resolution. The motion made the board accept the resolution with amendments. Michael made the motion, Patricia seconded. It was all unanimous, 12 yeses. The fourth motion, a Santa Monica Executive Board heard review of right to return resolution. It was a virtual motion made via email on April 8th of 2021. The motion was made by Rayna, seconded by Michael. The board approved the concept of the right to return resolution to be considered by council on April 13th. I think that date is now changed, and that we email to the council members and give public input therein. That was unanimous, 12 yeses, 0 no's, 0 abstentions. It passed. Almost done. Fifth motion was the executive board heard presentation by members of Santa Monica School Board of Education on the recall petition. Dami made the motion, Amy seconded. The board recommends membership oppose the recall petition. It was 12 yeses, 0 no's, 0 abstentions. It passed. The last is Santa Monica Democratic Executive Board heard the presentation on the Shore Hotels planned action before the Santa Monica Planning Commission scheduled for April 21st. Amy made the motion, Michael seconded. Motion, the SMDC Executive Board moves to take a position to oppose the Planning Commission amending the CUP for the Shore Hotel. There were 11 yeses, 0 no's, and 0 abstentions. Derek Dervamont was absent during that motion. That's it. That's my report. Thank you for listening.
Thanks
Anybody
so
wants
much.
a copy? I have all this information available for you to review.
Thanks, Amy. So now we can now get to our special guest speakers of the evening. So we discussed earlier that the California Democratic Party annual convention is starting tomorrow. We've been talking about this for months now when you factor in not just the officer elections, but the ADEM elections and so on. But with the results of the ADEM election, we have 14 elected delegates who represent 80/50. And one of those 14, the top vote getter, also represents our district on the executive board of the state party. And for the past 4 years, we've been represented on the e-board by Sue Himmelrich, who we all know very well. And prior to that was our dear friend, Susie Shannon. So now we have a new representative on the executive board of the CDP, Aura Vasquez. We want to take a moment to hear from our new e-board members. So she's elected for a 2-year term. Aura, why don't you introduce yourself and tell us about yourself and everything there is to know.
Yeah. Hello. Hi, everyone. Well, I feel like we all need to take a deep breath. That was a lot. Lots of information, lots of energy, lots of ideas. So I first want to start by thanking you for electing me to the e-board and also for electing me as a delegate. I'm Aura Vasquez. I'm an Afro-Latina from Colombia. My family and I immigrated to this country 25 years ago to New York City. I went to school in New York. I also went to the Kennedy School to study politics and community organizing. So 11 years ago, I came to California in the search of becoming an organizer. And this was after I learned more about organizing from ex-President Obama. And I mean, you never know where all these things, the turns that they take. And, you know, I started my career as a very young child back home. I saw a science show about the ozone layer, and I became very involved in environmental issues in my school. I founded the first environmental club in my school. And then later I led the campaign to get LA off of coal from the Sierra Club. So that's kind of how I started my career here. I also served as a commissioner for the Department of Water and Power. Maybe some of you learn about my efforts to retire 3 coastal gas plants here in Los Angeles, which has actually pushed Los Angeles to get to a 100% renewable energy goal. So very exciting stuff. I'm a renter, So issues of renters are very, of course, important to me. I created the first solar for renters program in the nation, and that it still lives in at the DWP, with DWP. So, you know, I always thought that the Democrats didn't, even though I grew up a Democrat and my family is Democrat, I never really thought that the Democrats spoke to me. Because, you know, I'm a 42 young professional, or maybe not so young anymore, but you know, I work hard, I have a good career, I earn good money, and yet I can't save to buy a home in Los Angeles, or even save for retirement. And this is a gap that we're continue seeing bigger and bigger every day, especially and sadly for people that look like me. So when I was given the opportunity to run for delegate, some of the things that I wanted to do was to expand the electorate. There are so many Democrats out there that we're going to need. And especially now that I hear recall all over. I mean, look, from the most local level that we're facing here, I heard earlier, to a state level, you know, with our government and with our governor. And it's going to take all of us to work together to make sure that, you know, we continue our leadership here. Can our leadership be better? Absolutely. So I belong to the Progressive Caucus here for our party, because my hope is that we don't ever see again what we saw in the last CADEMS elections, where people got registered and didn't get their ballot, where people got their ballot too late and couldn't count their votes, even though later we counted the votes. We are in 2021, where we have the most advanced technology. We just came up with a vaccine for a pandemic in 6 months. The largest Democratic Party in the country, which is here in California, can figure out how to have a remote vote where every Democrat can participate, not just the ones that register from this day to that day, or the ones that have a computer, or the ones that know or don't know. Another big issue that we have in our party is the lack of diversity and inclusion. And I'm not just talking about the leadership. If you see our, our chair, he doesn't represent clearly people of color, in my opinion, in our state. But not even our website is well done in any other language. And I'm not just talking about Spanish. I'm talking about Korean, Armenian, Hebrew. I mean, so many other languages where we need to be more accessible for Democrats. Now, ask yourself, what is like to be a Democrat? What are those values? What is it that we want to do? How we want to see the recovery of funding for this pandemic allocated in our different municipalities. I as someone that has had a very high position of power, and as someone that has been an organizer, I can tell you that we don't need a chair, we don't need a vice chair, we don't need anyone to really get what we want if we work together. So my hope is that as I represent you in the e-board, we continue working to make sure that our party is more accessible and more inclusive to all Democrats in our district. The convention is coming, so I hope all of you are registered and have registered all of the activities, virtual and not virtual. And this is the moment where we can also build relationships with other fellow Democrats, because we're going to need them. And if you are with me in the quest or in the crusade to make sure that every Democrat is counted, let me know. And I'm happy to serve with you and also for you. So thank you so much. I'm going to stop there so I can take some questions. And we can maybe have a short conversation. I know it's already 8:47, so I know people want to get to dinner and maybe margaritas.
So are there any questions for Aura? Well, I'll start off by just asking, what are you looking forward to most at this convention? I mean, the vote already happened. That's usually the highlight, is the big vote. But what are you looking forward to for this convention?
I'm really looking forward to build more relationships with a lot of other people and other delegates in our party, because I know that, for example, I want us to adopt a much more stronger policy around corporate donations, specifically to the party and to people that we endorse. So I'm especially interested on fossil fuel. So I would love for our party to adopt a no fossil fuel money pledge. And for that, we're going to need a lot of people to support that. I mean, we just saw that even banning fracking didn't go anywhere in a state that takes great pride to be an environmental steward, where we have the environment as one of our highest issues that we cared about. So I want to make more friends, and I hope to make friends with all of you guys. I met you the first time when I came to speak and ask for your support. And I know that I didn't get all the votes that I wish I would have had when you guys came, but I hope that this is just the beginning of our long-term friendship. And again, that we can get to work together in a lot of other policies that are coming up. And that you also guys message me. I'm going to put my information here on the chat. And you know, I'm very accessible on my social media and via email, but I hope that you guys can message me and keep me on the loop on things that you guys want to do, so that I can also support you and bring those to the executive board when we meet.
Thanks, Aura. Is there any other questions we have? Okay.
Don't be shy, guys.
Okay, here we go from Amy.
I have a question about you. You have a wonderful background and balancing your work in the corporate world with being a Democrat and having to look at policies that are more social awareness and social conscious. There's often a pushback and stuff like that you have to be mindful of. But I'm wondering, with your background, who was your mentor? Who mentored you? Because we are trying as a club to bring more inclusivity into the political party. And if there's mentors around that you felt led you into this area, could you share that with us?
I'm so glad you're asking that question, because you know, I was born in 1978, so I grew up in the 80s. And I always felt that a lot of my ideas and even being outspoken and like my personality was something that made people very uncomfortable. Because, you know, I'm in that analog digital bridge, you know, I'm in the middle of that. I'm in the middle of, I was not born with a cell phone, but, you know, now we have social media and all these things. And it was really hard to be in this world and have such forward thinking ideas, and not having someone that was going to tell me, you know, you should comply. Women comply. I was in that verge, you know, so I didn't really have a lot of people in my network that was, I have a lot of people encourage me, but they also constantly warn me that, you know, that I have, that my ideas were a little too much, or that I needed to learn how to play the game. And that was something that I just was always very against. You know, so I kind of kept doing it my way. And I actually have become mentor to a lot of other women. And, you know, like I was a commissioner for LADWP. This is before AOC. And, you know, this is before a lot of, and I love that we now have, you know, women in politics that are very outspoken. Because when and you probably know my fellow board member, the chair of my board, he was a former Congress member. And when AOC won, he used to call me, you're like our DWP AOC. You've been doing this and being outspoken and calling us things and going and doing your own thing. And we kind of want to manage you, but you're unmanageable. And I just, you know, I just really try to actually be a good example and encourage people now, and young women or women my age, on like, you just have to be yourself and you have to keep going. and you have to be outspoken. And this is the time for us to take a lot of space and to shine. You can dim the light. This is the time for all of us to shine, actually.
Thanks. Let's go to Angela Scott.
Hi, Ada, fellow delegate. So a question for you. I just wanted to, and you touched on it briefly, but I just wanted to hear how you deemed like the power of social media in your campaign, right? Like it seemed like that was a really big thing and it helped some people, and other people who didn't quite tap into it, they kind of suffered in the end. So what are your thoughts on that as far as social media and what you think are like the true engine in that as far as campaigning now?
Social media is so powerful, guys. Social media is scarily powerful. And it goes both ways. It goes very positive, and the haters are going to hate. So, you know, I have been in my name has been in forums with the far right, you know, which I think is very silly, but you know, I guess they don't have anything better to do. But I encourage all of you, this is the best way for you to tell who you are, for you to create awareness. Much of my social media is about awareness and education. Even when I talk about my curls, or even when I talk about, you know, that I do yoga or I take dance class, or, you know, you can let transpire your personality and create awareness about an issue and utilize that platform to reach your broader community. Because, you know, like I ran for city council for District 10, and I didn't have a lot of money and not a lot of people knew me. So we really utilized social media to get our message out, because it was like the cheapest, you know, and we were very successful. You know, I got 11,000 people voted for me. I got 25% of the vote. I was very like less than 1,000 votes short to, you know, to make it to the general. And more than that, like I said, it put me on the map for a lot of other women that look like me or feel or think like me. And, you know, in my campaign, I had high school students that will come and help and say, oh, you know, I want to write my paper for X class, and what I want is to be like you one day when like I finish college. And, you know, so it's so important that you can utilize your social media for your awareness and education, and to share who you are and encourage other people to do the same. So then, you know, I encourage everyone to step out of their own, you know, reservations around it. And we need, I mean, imagine if we could all be out there speaking about the issues that we cared about, like Medicare for all, like the Green New Deal, like the money out of politics. I mean, how powerful would we be? You know, so I definitely endorse that.
Thank you.
Thanks. Let's take one more question from Craig Miller.
Oh, thanks so much. My question was going to be, can I have Aura Vasquez's phone number? But she made it pretty clear that she's reachable on social media. So I just want to say, for reasons that have nothing to do with the content of tonight's discussion, I've been having a bit of a hard time staying awake. And Aura just like totally fixed that for me.
Yeah.
And the last thing I want to say is I rarely hear someone say, I wanted to be an organizer. That is not a common sentence. And that really caught my attention. Good for you. Please keep going. And please do not figure out the right way to do this, because don't figure that out. It's not worth your time. Just keep going.
Thank you. I appreciate it. You know, there are moments like I'm just gonna share this. It's maybe a little too much information for all of you guys, but this week, one of those far right forums, you know, put pictures of me, and they were saying all sorts of things, and it makes you wonder if you really want to be so transparent about your life. because one of the things that is important to me is authenticity. That I'm not portraying that I'm this person there, that I'm an asshole and in private, you know, like, or the, you know, that I'm telling you contact me, and then I'm like, no, you know. So this is, I mean, you get what you see, you know, and it really got me thinking. I was like, oh wow, maybe this is a little too much. Maybe I mean, like my stuff are like out there, like what's gonna be next, and you know, that was like a split second where I thought, well, you know, I mean, how many other people are going through this? I mean, you imagine Pelosi? I can only imagine like what they said in those forums about her. I mean, like my stuff were like bad, but oh well, you know, so it made me.
The woman can't even go get her hair done in peace.
Exactly. Yeah. So, and yeah, they talked very derogatory about me. It was sexual. It was about my race. It was all sorts of madness. And then I thought, no, these people just want, this is what they want. They want me to feel insecure. They want me to feel bad. They want me to play small, and we can play small. Guys, if anything, this pandemic brought to us is that we need to work together. We need to stick together, and we need to shine. We need to do it, whatever that means to you, whether you are a carpenter or a corporate, you know, CEO, or you're a nurse, or you're a teacher, or you're retired, whatever it is, you got to go out there and do it, you know. And how is also that those values align with like the greater that we're trying to build, to this vision that we're trying to, you know, bring to the world. So I really hope that all of this, my energy and my ideas, I really count on all of you to help me navigate all this stuff at the Democratic Party, because I feel like they need us so bad. And they need people that are going to have the courage and not going to just wait for the chair to say it and wait for the chair to do it, because I know that our diversity and working together is our greatest strength, and that we can do so much more, and that we don't need, you know, we can do so much together. So that's what I want to, you know, leave you guys with. I really hope that we can work together. I posted my email. I would love to be in touch. I see a lot of familiar faces here that are wonderful, that I have seen in other places. And I hope that this is, again, just the beginning of our long-lasting friendship.
I think it definitely will be, Aura, and I know that our diversity and inclusion committee chair already mentioned in the chat she wants to invite you to come there. So
Please.
we'll be, you know, we'll be in touch a lot, and I
love your energy, Aura.
For seeing you this weekend throughout the convention, and that's all the trainings and the sessions and all of that. So thanks again for coming. And now that it's 9:00 p.m. and the library would normally be kicking us out, it's now time to start our main topic of conversation for the night. So like I said at the beginning of the meeting, you know, we get it. If you've got to go to bed now, we're recording. This is going to be on YouTube by the time you wake up. Everybody watching on YouTube, hi, you know, thanks for tuning in again. And we're just going to keep going, and hopefully people are excited about it. So let's move on to our main issue tonight. We want to focus on various proposals to change the city governmental structure of Santa Monica. President Obama used to cite the preamble of the Constitution when he discussed the idea of building the more perfect union. We can love our nation, but we can be critical of its shortcomings. We can propose changes constructively and find new ways to build more democracy for more of our people. And that can be true here in Santa Monica. So tonight we're looking at 3 ideas that would fundamentally change how we are represented by our city government. The club has not taken a position on any of these ideas yet. Right now, our goal is to just have a presentation on these ideas in their clearest form by their most vocal Santa Monica proponents in order to start a conversation about some of these concepts. Before we hear from the 3 guest speakers, I've invited Mayor Himmelrich to first just explain the nature of Santa Monica as a charter city and what that means for how we would actually implement these fundamental changes if we decided to bring them to pass. So Mayor Himmelrich?
Well, thank you all for having me. I'm guessing Oscar, who's speaking later, is just as tired as I am. So I'll do the best I can. So Santa Monica is a charter city. What that means is that any requirements of our government that are written in the charter cannot be changed except by a vote of the people. And some of us who have run, and I think Craig has or started to, I've run a charter campaign. When we did term limits, that was a charter campaign. In order to switch from having no term limits because it wasn't spoken to in our charter to having term limits, you had to do a charter amendment. So that is why when we talk about these issues, they're talking about fundamental changes in the way we vote and will require a vote of the people before they can be enacted in our city. Does that cover it, John? You're muted.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you so much, Mayor. So with that in mind, we'll go to our first of the three topics, which is district elections. This is one that obviously has been talked about quite a bit for many years. And so we want to go to our council member, Oscar De La Torre, who's been probably the most vocal proponent of this idea, to just explain it. And Oscar, take it away.
Yes, thank you, John. And thank you all for staying with us. Really appreciate the opportunity for us to share some ideas and really to advocate for the spirit of the California Voting Rights Act, which emanates from the Voting Rights Act of 1965, which Congressman Lewis and Martin Luther King and the Civil Rights Movement gave birth to. And I think it's real important for us to understand that we are at a crossroads right now in our community here in Santa Monica. And really, you know, all the resolutions passed earlier, the discussions that we had in the past around the housing element, you know, sets the framework for this discussion. And really it's about systemic racism, the residues of systemic racism that are inherent in the at-large election system. First, I want to give a little bit of context. Growing up in the Pico neighborhood, you know, I never really understood as a child why we had, you know, the gang violence, why we had the freeway in our neighborhood, why there was social neglect, why we never had elected officials campaign in our part of the city, why the police abuse and the lack of protections for our constitutional rights. And as I grew older, I started realizing that all these things, I mean, everything from the freeway, you know, you look at the fact that the trash facilities and the hazardous waste storage facilities, vehicle maintenance yards, why, for example, Gandara Park emits methane, why it's a park was built on a former landfill, why all of these things occurred, really, it comes down to one very important factor, aside from systemic racism, is that we lack political representation. You know, we didn't have a voice at the table, and a loyal and compassionate and trustworthy voice at the table in our elections. And also the other thing that must be said is that most of the power was monopolized by the people with wealth and power in our city, mostly living in the north side of our city. And that's why we don't have diversity in the north side of the city, but we also don't have affordable housing, and we don't have, you know, social services that, you know, are conveniently placed in the Pico neighborhood. And it's really, really important for us to understand that's really what we're fighting for here is the idea that we keep talking about these words like equity, that we want to give power and voice and representation to those who need it the most, those who lack power in our city. And that's what really all of this is about. In 1946, we had something similar. Before 1946, there was something similar to district elections. It was called townships. And there were 3 townships. The white majority on the city council at the time voted to eliminate that and implement the at-large election system. At the same time that African Americans were moving into the Pico neighborhood. And really, it was very effective what they did, because their goal was to prevent and prohibit people of color from attaining power and representation on the city council. And it was effective. I mean, not until just this last election in 2020, we only had 1 African-American elected, Nat Travis, and 1 Mexican-American, Tony Vasquez, elected to the city council. But neither Nat or Tony lived in the Pico neighborhood. And so it's important for me to say that to be here today, I mean, I'm the first person of color to ever be on the city council, residing, in the Pico neighborhood, along with Kristen McCowan and also Christine Parra. So this is a unprecedented historic event that happened in this last election, but it is important to understand the history, and how we got here. The important thing also, and some people would say, well, hey, well, look, you have 3 people of color from the Pico residing in the Pico neighborhood now. Wouldn't district elections be bad, right? Because district elections will only guarantee that 1 will serve on the city council. The thing is that's just, we're looking at a slither of time, right? A small moment in our history where we have that representation, and it's not guaranteed. The reason why we support district elections, both myself and Councilwoman Parra support district elections, even if it meant that we have to run against each other. And that's very different than the position that council members took when they voted to oppose the voting rights case that was brought forward by my wife, Maria Loya, who will be speaking after me, and the Pico Neighborhood Association. It was about self-preservation. It was about preserving power. And I think that to do what's right, sometimes we have to make sacrifices. And I'm willing to run against my colleagues in order to do what's right, which is to make sure that there's a guaranteed seat always, that it's something that will happen, that we can count on, to have the stability of representation. And also, so every election cycle, but also to have that representation to be strongly connected to the voters in our part of the city, which, because of the historic patterns of racial segregation, are we have a lot of Latino and African-American residents in the Pico neighborhood historically. I mean, I haven't looked at all the data in a while, but I would say that most like 89% of all African-Americans in Santa Monica live within 2 zip codes, 90404 and 90405, and the same, the concentration isn't as heavy with Latinos, but it's very, very similar. You see these patterns of racial segregation. And it's really important for people to have a voice, to have that, and so that they can defend themselves and they can protect their quality of life, but also so that we can address the issues that impact people, issues that don't impact anyone else in the city. I'll just name one, gang violence, for example, where we suffered 68 homicides in an 8-block radius in the Pico neighborhood. Environmental justice issues, even last night in our city council meeting with people who are very strong on environmental issues. It's hard to get the support on to add environmental justice as a concept. So these are words that we use: inclusion, diversity, equity. They're meaningless if we're not putting resources in place. If our budget doesn't reflect that, if our hiring decisions don't reflect that, if our policies don't reflect that. And that's a pattern that we've seen in the city of Santa Monica, and that's why I'm a passionate supporter of district-based elections. District elections will solve the problem because the at-large election system drowns out minority votes. And I know, the details of the case. One of the big questions was, well, how does that work? I mean, we can't create a majority-minority district, right? That's one of the things that in the appellate court, it was one of those, that concept was thrown out there. You know, here's the thing. Let's say Latinos, for example, who are about 5% of the electorate, 14% of the population, let's say, and I'm throwing out some numbers out there that might not be completely accurate, but just for the sake of having the discussion, if you have 5% of voters, of Latino voters in an at-large election system, the vote gets diluted. If you have 30% of Latino voters in one district, the elected official cannot ignore that block of votes. And therefore, those minority voters will have more representation in our city and will have, you know, will have the ability to influence the decision-making of that elected official. So it's real important to understand that the California Voting Rights Act is intended to protect minority voting rights, right? It was enacted by Democrats. The state Democratic Party supports district elections and the California Voting Rights Act. The LA County Party also supports district-based elections and the California Voting Rights Act. So it's important for us to ask ourselves that question, like, you know, do we want to be on the side, you know, of these democratic principles supporting voting rights and minority voting rights, you know, the California Voting Rights Act that emanates from the Voting Rights Act of 1965 and the Civil Rights Movement, or do we want to be on the side of the Republican Party and their think tanks and so forth who are against district-based elections and oppose the California Voting Rights Act? As we know, this case is going before the California Supreme Court, right? I wish that we would have had this discussion 5 years ago, 6 years ago. Just know that we've made the attempt. We tried to avoid court. You know, we tried to work with the leadership of the city, and essentially we were ignored, right? And so the Superior Court has ordered, in the case, ordered that Santa Monica hold district-based elections. We know that on appeal, the appeal court reversed, but then the California Supreme Court took the case and depublished the Court of Appeals decision. The clock is ticking. The California Supreme Court is going to tell Santa Monica that it has to have district-based elections. We're pretty confident of that. There was just a case right now in Santa Clara that was settled for, after 6 years of litigation, settled for $4.5 million, taxpayer dollars. And I heard, you know, that our case here in Santa Monica, that elected officials here in the city have probably spent upwards to more than 10, maybe $15 million, you know, to preserve their power and their position. If Santa Monica wants a slightly different system than what we have with district-based elections and or any change in the map that was presented as a remedy, by the way, we presented a map as a remedy. The city of Santa Monica had an opportunity to also present its remedy, and they failed to do that. That needs to be negotiated before the California Supreme Court decides the case. So there is an opportunity for us to be united. We know we talk about that concept is really important, and I hope that we have that this discussion plants the seed for an opportunity for us to negotiate that before we go to the California Supreme Court. Because if we don't accomplish that, then there will be no reason for the plaintiffs to negotiate anything. At that point, we're leaving it up to the court. So I'm going to pass it on to one of the plaintiffs in the case, my wife, activist and leader, Maria Loya, who will also share some words with you all as well.
Hello, everyone. My name is Maria Loya. I'm a lifelong Democrat, and I'm also a Pico neighborhood resident and an activist. And in 2004, I decided to run for city council. And I ran for city council because I saw that Pico neighborhood residents were being neglected. And I wanted to make a change. I wanted to make a difference. So I ran in 2004, and I won every precinct in the Pico neighborhood. And while at the same election where Bobby Shriver was campaigning. In fact, the Kennedys were stumping for him. And although he won every other district, every other precinct in Santa Monica, he couldn't beat me in the Pico neighborhood. And so according to statistical analysis, I received essentially 100% of the Latino vote. And although I won every precinct in the Pico neighborhood, I came in 7th in the election. So Latinos didn't get their preferred representative. And the Pico neighborhood continued with no representation, no elected representation of people of color for another 15 years, right? In 2015, we started looking into district elections. We started looking into whether Santa Monica had violated the California Voting Rights Act. And once we looked into the history, we saw that indeed had been happening. And so in 2015, we sent a letter to the city council to begin negotiations regarding the CVRA and regarding exploring getting district elections, but we were ignored by the city council. And so in April of 2016, I, as the lead plaintiff, decided to sue the city of Santa Monica for violating the California Voting Rights Act and the Equal Protection Clause in our state's constitution. And so I wanna, again, stress that this is about racial justice. This is about civil rights. This is about voting rights of Latinos in Santa Monica, right? We talk a lot about racial justice. And so I think that this is about racial justice. This is about voting rights. And the Democrats have always been in favor of all of those principles and values. I wanna note that every respectable civil rights groups and Democratic elected officials, many of whom wrote to this California Supreme Court, urging the court to rule in favor of the plaintiffs and confirm that the Santa Monica's at-large elections violated the California Voting Rights Act. People like US Senator Alex Padilla, a coalition of 2002 California legislators who enacted the CVRA, including Congress members Judy Chu, Tony Cárdenas, and Lou Correa. Also, the Latino and African American and Asian legislative caucuses, 49 current legislators are included within that. The League of United Latin American Citizens, LULAC, Southwest Voter Registration and Education Project, the Mexican American Legal Defense Fund, the National Association of Latino Elected Officials, the Southern Christian Leadership Conference of Southern California, SCLC, Latino Caucus of the California Association of Counties, the California Latino School Board Association, the California Association of Black School Educators, Asian American Advancing Justice, Asian Law Caucus, Asian Law Alliance, Asian Pacific Environmental Network, Khmer Girls in Action, Lawyers Committee for Civil Rights, Fair Vote, and Dolores Huerta Foundation all support our case against Santa Monica. And so I think it's important we have an opportunity as Democrats here in Santa Monica to stand on the right side of history. And so we either stand with the rest of our Democratic brothers and sisters, advocating for district elections, or we stand on the side of Republicans continuing to support at-large elections. The choice is going to be ours. I want to thank you all for giving me the opportunity to come and speak with you regarding this very important issue. Thank you very much. And next I want to have Kevin come and say a few words.
Thank you, Maria. And I want to thank the Santa Monica Democratic Club for having this discussion. I think it's a very important one to have. But I want to address two issues that were raised in the email that went out regarding this. And as John Katz mentioned, the Santa Monica Democratic Club has not taken a position on this matter, and that is true. But we should also note that the LA County Democratic Party and the California Democratic Party have taken a firm and unequivocal position on this. The LA County Democratic Party, let me just read a little bit of the resolution that the LA County Democratic Party passed, and the California Democratic Party has passed something similar. Quote, "Be it further resolved that the Los Angeles County Democratic Party supports all efforts to uphold the principles of the California Voting Rights Act and to replace at-large voting systems in local election jurisdictions with district-based voting systems to afford all voters the opportunity to elect representatives of their choice. Democrats support district elections, Republicans support at-large elections." The next thing, and I'm sure that Mayor Himmelrich, addressing this topic, did not, well, certainly didn't intend to deceive anyone, I'm sure. But the email also stated that the election system in Santa Monica can only change through a charter amendment and a vote of the electorate to do that. That is actually not true. There are two ways other than a vote of the electorate that the election system can, and in my view, should change. One is through the court, and two is through a simple ordinance passed by the city council. Obviously, the court can change the election system regardless of what the city charter says. And in fact, if the court change is enacted, we know what that will look like. It will be the 7-district map that this LA Superior Court adopted. And the other way that the Santa Monica can change its election systems to either a fully district-based election system or a district election system for 6 members with an at-large mayor is through a simple ordinance. In 2016, the legislature amended Government Code Section 34886 to allow city councils to do exactly that. In fact, the city of Carson, not far from Santa Monica, is a perfect example. In 2018, the city of Carson adopted a charter that specified its elections would be at large. In 2020, the city of Carson adopted an ordinance changing to district elections by a simple majority of the city council. I just wanted to correct those points. I want to leave it to Oscar and Maria on the substantive issues. And so I will turn it back over to Oscar. Thank you.
Yes, so in conclusion, we want to ask the Santa Monica Democratic Club to stand with us on the right side of history, to remedy a historic wrong. The at-large election system is rooted in systemic racism. So we have an opportunity to change that. And I hope that we have an opportunity to stand united against systemic racism. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Oscar, Maria, Kevin. I appreciate your presentation this evening. And I see we have a question from Tony Vasquez from the Board of Equalization. So Tony, go ahead.
Yeah, I just have a couple of quick questions and actually just wanted to give a little bit of history at the same time. The Voting Rights Act that was created some time back was created by then Senator Richard Polanco, and his staff at the time was Alan Clayton, who's still alive, Joaquin Avila, who's passed away, he was the attorney, and Saeed Ali, who's passed away recently. Those 3 folks, when they crafted this, knew that, Alan Clayton, who was the principal guy that's still alive, he knew that Joaquin Avila, who did the legal argument for this, made a mistake and left this loophole that you have people like Kevin Shankman running around suing school districts, college districts, and cities on this little clause. we're not against district elections. I'm not against district elections. They make sense when the population is 50% and it's all white members sitting on a city council, sitting on a school board, or sitting on a college board. That's not the fact in Santa Monica. This last election, if we had district elections, we wouldn't have elected the first African-American woman and 2 Latinos, a Latina for the first time and a Latino, if we would have had district elections. In this at-large system, we actually are doing better for Latinos. So my question to Oscar, Maria, and your ambulance chaser attorney, what is the remedy here? What is the remedy? We're supposed to be going forward. If we go to district elections, you're taking us backwards, because the best we can get under districts elections is 1 out of 7. Right now, we have 3 Latinos or 2 Latinos, 1 African-American that represent the whole city, not 1/7 of the city. So how is that moving forward? You're taking us back. And if you talk to the Latino, I'm on the Latino caucus. This hasn't come before us recently, because if it comes before us, this case, I can guarantee you they would not support what this ambulance chaser is trying to do to the city of Santa Monica, which is basically extorting money, public funds. At the end of the day, for us to even think about settling this thing would be in the wrong direction, because if you were to settle this case, at the end of the day, it's not, right now it's Maria Loya. Tomorrow it could be Joel Garcia. The next year it could be Tom Flores suing us. Until we settle this case, at the end of the day, people can still come after us and keep suing us. And you could ask the attorney there, and he would answer you. He has to be honest about it. Hopefully he would be. And if he's honest about it, he's going to tell you that if you don't get a final ruling on this, this case doesn't end. The argument will continue. And I just ask you, at the end of the day, I think all of us are all about representation. In Santa Monica, we're looking at 90,000 people. And, when I started this movement for district elections back in the 80s, 80% of the Latinos live in the Pico neighborhood. They don't anymore. I live in Sunset Park. Many of my relatives live in Ocean Park. Others live north of Montana. Some live in mid-cities. We're spread out throughout the city. We're not concentrated in the Pico neighborhood anymore. That used to be the case. But, obviously, the freeway displaced a lot of Latinos and African Americans over the years. And, there's been movement throughout the city. And we need to embrace that. And at the end of the day, why would we propose something that's going to take us backwards?
So Tony, it's good to see you, not in the context of a deposition, but in a Democratic club meeting. I don't really.
Speaking of that deposition, you and your fellow attorneys, you red baited me. You were asking me if I was ever a member of the Communist Party, and I think that's red baiting. You're talking about Republicans. You're a red baiter.
So. I think the name calling is unfortunate, but let's try to raise ourselves above that. And I would like to answer some of your questions, Tony. And though it's good to see you, it's sad to see that you have taken a turn on this position from where you were at back in the early 90s, and this was raised to the city council. And you were a champion of this issue back then. And
I still am.
Our mutual friend, and I know our mutual friend Antonio Gonzalez, before he passed away, was very sad to see that you did take this turn.
And I explained it to Antonio. You make it sound like Antonio was on board. Okay. I explained it to Antonio, and I told Antonio, I said, how is this going to help Latinos? And he admitted to me before he died. He said, you're right, but you were an exception. That's never going to happen again. You're never going to have another Latino elected in Santa Monica. And that is bullshit, because it just happened.
Tony, I appreciate your passion. Can I answer your question?
Go ahead, Kevin. Sorry. Go ahead.
Yeah, so thank you. With respect to the intent of the California Voting Rights Act, you mentioned that the bill was introduced and championed by Senator Richard Polanco. You're absolutely correct. And I would note that Senator Polanco was a signatory to one of those amicus letters, and he supports our cause 100%, as does the Latino caucus. Now, I know that you are not in the legislative caucus, but sort of an honorary member in your position as state board with the State Board of Equalization. The chair at that time was Lorena Gonzalez, and she is 100% in support of district elections in Santa Monica in our lawsuit. Those are the facts. Now, Tony, you throw out a bunch of numbers about the demographics. That's just wrong. And I'd be happy to have this conversation with you about the specific numbers, what they were in 1992 and what they are today. But
Kevin,
there is no question.
You need to be honest with
Senator
these folks,
Polanco,
because before you filed the lawsuit,
California voting rights,
before you
the
filed the
California
lawsuit,
Voting
I
Rights
asked
Act.
you, show me the districts where this helps us. You never showed it to me. I asked Maria, I asked Oscar. They never showed me those district elections until you filed the lawsuit. So who's being disingenuous? Let's be honest. And for all due respect, when you talk about Senator Polanco, ask him. He doesn't know election law, but ask him who was his staff that directed this. And those three individuals, well, two of them have passed away. Alan Clayton is still alive today. If you were to call him up and bring him to this meeting, he would tell you that they screwed up. They screwed up when they crafted this language. It's not about turning like Santa Monica into districts. That's going in the wrong direction.
Okay, so
I'm sorry that you're against the California Voting Rights Act. There is no question that the
I'm not
principal
against
purpose of the
district
California
elections.
Voting Rights Act.
I'm not.
The key difference between the California Voting Rights Act and the federal act is the California Act does not require geographical concentration of a minority group such that they would constitute the majority of a single member district. That is just a fact, and the Supreme Court will confirm that very soon. I imagine there are other people that want to ask questions, probably of Oscar, not just me. So perhaps I'd suggest we move on.
Thanks, and I appreciate your questions, Tony. I'd like to go to Dan Hall.
Yeah, thank you, John, and thank you, Kevin, Oscar, and Maria for your time tonight. Appreciate the presentation. My question is sort of along the lines that Tony had just brought up, and a couple people have dropped in the chat. Let's just put some numbers to the populations here. So I'm looking at the census data, and I'm rounding, but 15,000 of our 90,000 citizens are Latino, and only 5K of them live in zip code 90404, which is basically contiguous with the proposed district that covers the PICO Association. So what we're talking about here is cracking and packing. And while that may produce a district that has a 30% of the Latino population, doesn't that effectively dilute 2/3 of the Latino vote in Santa Monica, when as a voting bloc, you're much more powerful in an at-large system?
You know, I think it's the opposite. In an at-large election system, your vote is more diluted than in a district election system. The other thing that's real important is, and I've done the research on this, and it shows that when you have a district-based election system, minority candidates are more likely to run, mainly because it decreases the cost of the election. You know, if you're just running in one district, it's cheaper than if you run citywide. So in terms of special interests, you know, there's less influence. I mean, the resident voice is uplifted in a district-based election system. Candidates have to run a ground campaign. They have to door knock in order to win. You know, it's hand-to-hand combat, you know, when it's a district-based election. At large, the slick mailers, the money, you know, plays a bigger role. So if you want to decrease the influence of big money and special interests, which Aura talked about earlier, a district-based election system is better for that. It's more inclusive and also more accessible in terms of democracy for residents in the city of Santa Monica.
So I think those are fair points, but it doesn't address the question of, doesn't that dilute 2/3 of the Latino vote across the 6 other districts?
Yeah, so thank you for the question, Dan. It's more of a legal question than a policy question. You know, actually that argument has been rejected as a matter of law about 35 years ago in the case of Gomez versus the city of Watsonville. It does not dilute the Latino vote in other parts of the city. What we were able to show at trial is that the Latino preferred candidates, with one exception, and it's the gentleman who called me an ambulance chaser a while ago. He was the one exception of Latino preferred candidates in the last 25 years, from 1994 when he lost all the way through 2016. Just the one Latino preferred candidate who won. And in a district election system, like you heard from Maria Loya, she almost certainly would have won in 2004 and placed 7th. That really tells us what we need to know. With the at-large system, Latino preferred candidates almost never win, and in a district election system, they would.
Oh, okay, so I'm gonna cut off the conversation there, and I did mention in the chat, but the original discussion I had with Oscar was that we would just be discussing the topic of district elections. So the portion of the discussion that was referring to the lawsuit was not really in the purview of what we were trying to discuss tonight. So I apologize to those who you know, were upset about that, and I understand there are some issues there for some of the council members. So I just wanted to just say that. Oscar, do you have just a closing thought, specifically you, if you don't mind, and then we'll move on to the next.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, look, it's a controversial issue, but I think it's real important, you know, for people to really think about what's best for the city in terms of what we're trying to accomplish. I mean, I've served on the school board for 18 years. I'm on the city council now. And, you know, I think it's real important when you have a full representation on the dais, when you have all neighborhoods represented, you know. And even though right now I have three people of color on the city council. Well, usually what would happen is you would have 3, you know, north of Montana on the school board, for example. Right now, I think there's 5 out of the 7 that live in the north side of the city. We want to have fair representation throughout the city of Santa Monica. Let's have every neighborhood represented on the dais so that people can grapple with the issues that affect the entire city of Santa Monica. The other thing that happens too, that we're only focusing on the city, but with this decision that will come from the Supreme Court, or if we find a way to get district-based elections, it's going to be 4 elected officials living in the Pico neighborhood, right? City, school board, college board, and rent control board. And that's more than we've ever had in terms of representation on all governing bodies. And that to us, I think is better, a better system than what we've had, which the at-large election system has not served us well. I mean, look at the impact, you know, look at the history, look at what's happened in terms of, you know, the quality of life in the Pico neighborhood. I lived through it, you know, so I can speak from personal experience that the at-large election system marginalized us and led to serious harm. I'm talking about environmental harm, you know, real violence, you know, all that, so many issues, you know, that we're still grappling with today. We live with the residues of that. And I think a district-based election system is going to be better for the city of Santa Monica moving forward on the question of racial justice and also on the question of a better government for all. Thank you all very much.
Thanks, Oscar, and thank you for your presentation. And now we'll move on to the next discussion, which is on with our own membership Vice President Michael Soloff, who's going to present on a concept of hybrid model, hybrid system. And Mike, you should have the ability to share your screen.
Great, thank you. Let me see if I can do this. Are you seeing my screen?
Yeah, yeah.
Okay, let me just get it into slideshow mode. Okay, well, thank you, everyone. I am going to talk tonight about the case for hybrid city council elections, but before I begin, I want to make a few points. And if you kind of wonder why sometimes I'm looking to the side, that's because I have two screens here. So I see all of you on that screen and I see my presentation in front of me. First of all, I want to be very clear. I'm speaking tonight simply as my personal views and not on behalf of anybody else. Secondly, I am most explicitly not talking about the pending lawsuit or the legal issues presented there. Consistent with what I understood was the purpose of tonight, I'm talking to you about a form of government that exists in many places in the United States that I've come to the conclusion after looking at this may be the best form of government if the voters of the city of Santa Monica choose to adopt it. Third, I'm not purporting to give you the final word on all of the issues that I'm talking about tonight with the hybrid city council elections. Again, consistent with my understanding of the purpose of tonight's meeting, I'm introducing a concept so people can start thinking about it. I think any significant change in the form of government is certainly one that should be studied carefully and thoughtfully. And finally, I'm going to talk both about some general observations about the hybrid city council concept, and as well as some of my personal observations about how that might apply here in the city of Santa Monica. So the first and most obvious question is, so what is a hybrid city council election? And so what a hybrid city council election is an election where some portion of the voting for city council members is by district, and some other portion of it is voting at large. According to the National League of Cities, about 20% of municipalities in the United States, that's 1 in 5, currently employ a hybrid election system for their city councils. The oldest system, as far as I could tell from my research, is in Tucson, Arizona. It was adopted in 1929. They have a model where they actually have partisan primaries by district, and then the candidates who are nominated by the parties are then voted on in the general election by the entire city. So you have to both satisfy your local district in order to get nominated, and then you also have to be appealable to the entire city in order to get elected in the general election. And I noted in the course of looking at this that Seattle actually uses this Tucson model, but they use it for their nonpartisan school district primaries and general elections. And they use a different hybrid system for their city council elections. So that's the Tucson model. The more typical hybrid city council election system in the United States is one where some portion of the city council is elected by district and some other members of the city council are elected at large. And I just hear a few examples that I pulled up in looking at this. In Seattle, as I said, for city council, they have 7 districts and 2 at large. In Charlotte, North Carolina, they have 7 districts and 4 at large. In Houston, Texas, they have 11 districts and 5 at large. So what are some of the potential upsides of district elections for city council? Well, number one is that it allows candidates with more limited financial resources, whether they be personal, party, and special interest PAC money, an opportunity to compete and win. And that's going to be particularly true, in my opinion, in a city like Santa Monica, which is a small city where our districts, whether we had 6 or 7 or whatever, would be relatively small. And I think, as Oscar mentioned, you could knock on all those doors in an election or get pretty close to it. Now, it's a little different. In Seattle, for example, the size of a single district is the same as the entire city of Santa Monica. And we all know in Los Angeles County, where we have districts for supervisor, but there are 2 million people in the district. So I guess that's why I say I think that for a small city like Santa Monica, this truly could open the door to people with pretty limited resources being able to compete. It also ensures that, as I think Oscar also pointed out, that there's at least one council member who's particularly attuned to the concerns of each voter, your district council member, and depending on the map drawing, to each neighborhood. And again, I think that this is upsides that are more particularly true in a small city like Santa Monica, where the number of voters per council member would be relatively low in the district system. Now, we've heard some other potential upsides of district elections, which is under certain circumstances, districts can result in increased numbers of people of color as members on the city council. But we should be aware that empirical research indicates that only occurs where there are large numbers of Black and Latinx voters who are concentrated in geographical areas and voting is racially polarized. Doesn't appear to me that's the case in Santa Monica. I know this is something that's being argued about in the lawsuit. I don't want to get into any of that. I'm just pointing out to you that there is some other views on that other than the ones that you've heard tonight. And let me just raise here. This is one of the studies I was reading in preparing for this, in preparing to support a hybrid system, which will include districts. But here's an article which talks about the difference between districts and at-large systems. And main point of it is the context matters. And their conclusion after their empirical analysis is, quote, by taking advantage of the institutional variation across cities in the United States, we've gained a more nuanced understanding of the representation of women and racial and ethnic minorities. Single-member district systems can increase diversity only when underrepresented groups are highly concentrated and compose moderate portions of the population. These factors are most important in the arena where polarized voting predominates and where groups leverage their population size to achieve descriptive representation. In addition, the effect of the electoral system is not constant across all people of color, nor is it constant across both genders. Race and gender interact to produce different results. Our findings demonstrate the need for caution when making declarations of the benefit or detriment of institutional settings. While the electoral rules certainly have an effect, the context in which they are employed is also crucial to gain a complete understanding. But so whether that may be a benefit of districts and it may not be, depending on the context. Again, I'm not going to get into the argument that we heard here tonight, the litigation argument, but I think it's people in thinking about these kinds of changes need to look into empirical research and think about how those things apply. And also, and again, I'm not purporting to have done, the level of research that would need to be done before you make a decision, but I did come across this information in a January 2nd, 2019 article put together by KPCC, the LAist. And so here they were talking about that there had been large numbers of cities in California that have changed from at-large to district elections from 2016 through the time of this article. And I'm just showing you what they said in their report that, and this is for Southern California, there were 30 cities in which this change occurred. And they say that in 9 cities, you ended up with 11 Latinos, 2 Blacks, and 2 Asians additionally being added to those 9 city councils, so a total 15 for those 9. And then 21 additional cities, they saw no change in their council's demographic makeup from that result. And here's more broadly in the state of California, that showing sometimes there's minority seat gains. They indicate that, it's typically 1, occasionally 2. A lot of cities, there's no impact, and in a few cities, minority groups lose seats as a result of district elections. So there's no question that there's potential. This is a potential upside of district elections, but whether it would apply here, it's certainly not something that can simply be assumed in all contexts. There's also interesting empirical research on the impact on women. And some earlier research had indicated that there was either no impact on the election of women or a negative impact. And the hypothesis there was that, well, if you had a general election, a citywide election, there'd be more slots. And so maybe people would feel like, well, we have to have at least some gender diversity. And so you would get some women elected, but there'd be fewer when it's just a choice of either you have a man or a woman and that's it. And more recent research, though, I found an article that was using California only data, because apparently we keep a lot more information about municipal elections than most states do, found that districts actually do result in more women running for city council and winning. It was interesting to me in that article that other structural issues may have an even bigger impact. For example, there was a very big impact between more women running and being elected in city manager council cities than in mayor council cities. And this is a hypothesis, and I want to be very clear here. This is by 3 women researchers. This is not me, saying that women were, their hypothesis from the data they looked at was that women were more willing to run and more acceptable to voters in lower prestige positions, and that districts, because they represent a smaller number of people, fit that impact. They were also in this article noting how many women win the position of city clerk when that's an elected position compared to winning mayors when that's elected. But in any event, there does seem to be evidence that districts may end up increasing in some circumstances the number of women running and winning for city council. So it can impact diversity, but it's a much more nuanced picture out there, at least according to the literature and the experience we've seen here in California. So, but what are some of the potential downsides of district elections? Well, one is, only one city council member is electorally accountable to each voter. Right now in Santa Monica, all 7 members have electoral accountability to every voter. With districts, only those who can make monetary donations, mobilize in-kind resources, or are opinion leaders in the city would have influence over city council members from outside the district in which they reside. The second thing is that each voter would only be able to express their opinion when their district council member is up for election, and only as to the performance of that single council member. Right now, each voter can express their opinion every 2 years by voting on half the city council seats. I can certainly say for myself, personally, I would find it frustrating if only once every 4 years could express an opinion on one person. A third is that only a single person can be elected from a district, whether or not voters in other districts prefer someone living outside their district. And as we've had some discussion already tonight, hopefully I'm going to present it in a slightly less heated way. In our last election, we have 3 residents of the Pico neighborhood who won seats, and the closest runner-up was also from the Pico neighborhood, if I understand correctly, where Terry O'Day lives. And switching to districts would assure that 2 of the current council members of color would lose their seats on the city council. I think we heard in a different context some discussion of that, but the general point is that you're limited to 1 person from a residential area, regardless of whether voters think that they may prefer somebody who doesn't live in their neighborhood. Another potential downside of district elections is that the district map drawing could distort political power. And again, I don't want to get into an argument about the lawsuit and the map that was drawn there. Suffice it to say, it was already controversial among people about whether that was going on there or not. Obviously, different people have different opinion. But if in the context that I'm talking about, which is not lawsuits, but what do we want to design as our process here in the city if we're free to do so and the voters get to choose it. The extent of the risk is going to depend in part on the procedures that are used for drawing district boundaries. And I don't, for a profession, do election law, but I did see in my research that we have 3 different kinds of commissions that are now in the California elections code. There's an advisory form of commission that you can have where the council retains the authority to draw the map. One can see the obvious potential for political influence on the map in that context. There is a hybrid version, and I said here creates 2 maps. It's actually 2 or more maps, and then the city council gets to choose among those maps, but not create another one. And then you can have, they actually call it an independent commission, but I called it a citizens commission here, but in the statute it's called an independent commission, which basically means that the city council doesn't have a role in drawing the map. And then finally, there's, the big issue, which is, do people who are elected solely from a district have the overall interests of the city at heart? So just as there is the concern that if you're only elected from the city, some or all parts of the city could be ignored by elected officials. The converse is also a risk, that if everybody only comes from a district, their only political accountability is to people in that district, and they may not take into consideration the overall concerns and the overall well-being of the city. So would a hybrid election system be a potential solution to this balance of upsides and downsides? And I'll talk at the end a little bit. There are obviously a lot of details that can be worked out, but if you had a hybrid system, and this is why it attracts me, you would assure that candidates with fewer resources or that are not that well known have a realistic opportunity to be elected to the city council from their district. And once they're elected from their district, they will be on the city council, they will be seen and act in ways that will be viewed by everyone in the city. And from there, they would be in a position that they could get to be known, and if they were popular among the city as a whole, would have an opportunity to run for those positions citywide. A hybrid system would also assure that every voter would have one council member who's particularly attuned to his or her concerns, particularly in a small city like ours, and to any shared concerns of their neighborhood. Hybrid system would also allow that, and we could design it that a majority, for example, we could have 6 districts and 5 at large, and that means that every voter in the city would get to vote for 6 out of 11 city council people, or it could be a plurality. It could be like Charlotte, where you had 7 districts and 4 at large. And so, obviously that's a detail that could be worked on and what makes the most sense. But you would also have more than just one person. You'd have a significant portion of the council that's electorally accountable to every voter. It would also assure, assuming it's a city like ours, when you had staggered elections, that every voter can express their views at the ballot box every 2 years about what the city council is doing. It would also allow for more than one highly qualified and generally liked and supported resident of a neighborhood to serve on the city council at one time. A hybrid system would minimize the potential for map drawing to distort political power, since only a portion of the election, the city council would come from districts that could be influenced by map drawing, and the rest would be the city as a whole. It would assure that a majority, again, or a plurality, it could be, you can see there's a wide range of numbers that different cities have selected. The city council is concerned with the overall well-being of the city, or at least is motivated to be. Hopefully all council people would take that seriously, but are electorally motivated to be concerned about the overall well-being of the city because they have to run. And then, if this is a system, and it's one that I think by balancing the pros and cons here, I think would be good, then there are a lot of details that would have to be considered. How many of each would you have? How would you try and tie the leadership of the city council and or the mayoralty to that? For example, you could have a system where, and I know that Craig Miller is going to speak about the issue of directly electing a mayor. It could be directly elected as a separate election, and you could then have that the leadership of the city council would come from the people who ran at large, which would give an incentive for people to graduate from the district only to the citywide thing, general at large representation positions. You could have that the mayor is whoever is the person that runs at large that gets the most votes. So there are a lot of details or ways it could be done. I'm not here tonight to suggest any particular one. What I am here to say is that for me, I do think that there are some legitimately articulated upsides, thinking about it from a pure public policy point of view, to having districts, particularly in a smaller city like ours, and particularly in terms of access and other issues. And it may help on some diversity issues, but also having the at-large, I think, helps address what are, in my view, many downsides from a pure public policy point of view of having pure district elections. So that's why I think that hybrid is something that if we are free to choose our electoral system going forward, that we ought to consider and join the 1 in 5 cities in America that have taken this approach. Let me unscreen share.
I just took care
Oh,
of.
you were able to do that for me? Thank you.
So thanks so much, Mike. That was a great presentation. And does anybody have any questions for Mike about this concept? Susan, yeah, go ahead.
You're muted, Susan.
I don't know if you're willing to comment on the current status of the Supreme Court case, but in the event that the Supreme Court were to rule in favor of district voting, could Santa Monica then on its own choose to go to a hybrid system?
I'm not here to comment on the legal issues, and I don't know the answer to that. I'm here to talk about it, assuming we're free to design the system
Assuming
that we
that we're
want.
free to design. Okay, thank you.
Okay, and do you have any other questions? Okay, great. So thanks, Mike. Really appreciate that. And now I want to turn it over to, for our third presentation, Craig Miller from the organization Santa Monicans for Democracy.
Well, good evening, everybody, and thanks for inviting me. Just a couple initial comments, if I may. You guys are really interesting, and I ought to get out more. And this is quite a rich discussion, and thanks for having it. You're also, or at least in this meeting, I'm finding that you're also fairly intense, or in any case, don't seem to be intensity adverse. And I think that's good. I mean, yeah, I think think it's good. And decorum has its place, and I think should generally be the rule of the day. But when decorum ends up being a higher priority than actually substantive discussions, then I think we're moving in directions that run counter to democracy, even though decorum is often put forward as a key element in democracy. It's both. It's both. Anyway, thanks, John, for the invitation. It's a privilege to be invited along with Michael Soloff, who I know has a long history of dedicated service to this community. And I also just want to say that it is a great thrill and honor to share any platform with Councilmember Oscar de la Torre. Oscar is my brother. Oscar and I agree about 2/3 of the time, disagree about 1/3 of the time, including in a recent police-related motion that he supported and I opposed. Nonetheless, I remain very grateful for his service to this city and his presence on the council. Congratulations to Angela Scott for being named to this commission. I also just want to acknowledge Mayor Sue and say that I think she is a great mayor. And speaking of great mayors, a while back, Tony Vasquez weighed in on an, he sort of caught the tail end of a somewhat, tangential and obscure issue, but it was First Amendment related. And Mayor Vasquez, sorted it out really well in a short amount of time, and I appreciate it. So I know that there's a couple of things that a public speaker ideally would never do. One is say, I'm nervous, and I won't say that because I'm not. But another thing that is typically best avoided is for the speaker to say, oh, let me take a couple minutes to tell you where I'm at or what's going on with me right now. And it's not a good idea, but I'm gonna violate that briefly just to say, tonight, I am sad, I am inspired, and I am exhausted. And I'm sad because because a 92-year-old dynamic woman in New York City who has raised over $1 million over the course of about 30 years of walking an AIDS Walk New York passed away. And I was asked to deliver a talk for the group that was sitting Shiva. And that was just yesterday. And the other thing I just want to share is my good friend and executive assistant Phil Herodko, his mother was just diagnosed with leukemia. So I've been in his presence, watching him try and support me and our organization in some things that we're doing. And I'm very moved by the fact that he's even showing up to work. I'm a bit exhausted for things that have nothing to do with any of this, but I'm happy to be talking with you all. I also want to just briefly explain myself, okay, and my approach to Santa Monica politics. And it is to say, I don't really know it well. I know politics pretty well, and I know Santa Monica pretty well, but I make no claim about knowing Santa Monica politics very well. I don't have an informed grasp on, the Santa Monica Democratic Club and any of its particular biases or orientations, or Santa Monicans for renters' rights, or Santa Monica Forward, or who likes Kevin McCune, or who likes Glenn Davis, or, oh, I've heard this club is really strong behind Anna Hara. Okay, well, that's cool. Anna Hara, she seems like a fine person. And I have not gotten really involved in what is opportune to say where or to whom. And therefore, I will admit that I'm a bit clumsy. And I don't often find myself, well, I'll just say that. And I'll also just say that this presentation, which I'll now actually get to the meat and bones of, this presentation is not going to be academic. It's going to be personal. And I just want to address these issues through the lens of a few real life experiences of a real life resident in Santa Monica, and what that potentially, or I think does speak to in terms of structural change needed within this city government. And I think issues of what are other cities doing, and what size are they relative to us, and so who does have a citywide elected mayor, or who has a citywide elected city attorney, and what populations does that seem to make fit best, or what populations does that maybe not sit so well, or essentially, what have been the best practices of municipalities on dealing with the issue of, a council-appointed mayor, or switching to a citywide publicly elected mayor? And I think that the academic studying up on those issues and those questions really needs to be a part of the discussion and the consideration. And I just want to say, I'm not prepared to do that tonight. And I don't have that expertise. And frankly, I don't have the wherewithal to present that tonight, perhaps even if I did. But as I said, I approach this, and I want to present this tonight through the lens of a resident, real life circumstances, and just 4 incidences that, or matters that happen that I think speak to structural change. Two of the matters took place in the course of an effort I was involved in with regards to an obscure issue, advertising rights on the side of Big Blue Bus, okay? And two of the issues relate to things that occurred subsequent to 5/31. All right, so this Big Blue Bus advertising issue, which I'm going to try and avoid the details of because it's probably not terribly interesting, but it's also not terribly relevant. Here's the big piece that I would present as being very relevant. About 8 years ago, I came to the mayor of the city of Santa Monica, and I said, there's this issue, there's this issue, and at the heart of this issue, Mayor, are matters that it's really hard to believe that like a very big broad swath of the constituency or the population of Santa Monica would see it differently than how AIDS Project Los Angeles is seeing it, or how I'm seeing it. And the mayor at that time took that in. And I'm not going to quote him, but he basically said in response to hearing this and to sort of hearing my plea for, democratically elected intervention on an issue of substance and of concern to at least some constituents and arguably many. Okay. Beyond that, I don't think the details are important. Here's what I think is important. That mayor said to me, and I'm going to paraphrase because it was said to me privately, but not in confidence. But anyway, that mayor said to me, in essence, I feel you. I have some concern about the issue that you're bringing and you're representing here. God knows I have an empathy for the activities of AIDS Project Los Angeles or AIDS Walk Los Angeles. But here's the key phrase. But Craig, we can't just tell the city staff what to do. Well, I think that's a pretty interesting comment. And I think it speaks to a pretty interesting structural question and policy question. So city staff really deserves to be treated with respect. City staff, their opinions and their expertise ought to be fully tapped and fully engaged in any policy question. But are we really a city where ultimately the culture of the electeds, was, and to a troubling degree, I think still is, but we can't just tell the city staff what to do. And I think that what inherently that points to is there's a troubling blurriness as to who exactly are the constituents of the council members. And I think that there's a very valid and important question that needs to be asked here, which is, are the primary constituents of the council members the residents, or are the primary constituents the administrative class that resides within City Hall? My belief is that for too long and in too many instances, the council has related to the executive staff or the executive staff and the key department leaders of the city as their primary constituency and not the residents. And I think I know why. If you're a part-time council member, which they all are, and you're trying to do other things in your life, like have a family, support your kids, be a decent parent, maybe get a little sports in or whatever. And you also, have this council position that you want to be effective in. Well, I think there's a problem. And the problem is it's going to be hard to be effective when you're part-time, the executive staff is full-time. And you, as a part-time council member that maybe has some issues that are basically core to your being, and astonishingly, who gets to advertise on the big blue bus might not be one of those issues, okay? Well, those council members have a problem. And the problem is, well, they kind of feel AIDS Project Los Angeles. They kind of feel AIDS Walk Los Angeles. Maybe they even feel me a little bit. But if you're council member X and your primary mission is to try and make progress on 2 or 3 key initiatives that you actually care deeply about, then you might want to be careful and cautious when it comes to, for lack of a better word, actually, I think it's probably the exact right word, crossing the full-time, well-compensated executive leadership within City Hall. Because if you cross them, you know, make it infrequently and make it something pretty significant, because you're potentially compromising the degree to which those city executives are going to support you, council member, or help you achieve, council member, those 2 or 3 things that actually are core to you. Okay, so if you, council member X, veer off too much and start siding with, you know, pesky constituents a lot on issues, and as opposed to the more presumably more sophisticated, more knowledgeable executive staff, you might have a problem getting that executive staff to act promptly or in a priority way on issues that you really do care about. Okay. So that was a long story on one piece, and I might not even need to get to the other 3 examples, but I offer that as sort of just maybe a little bit amateurish, maybe too personal of a case study, but nonetheless I offer that as a case study. Here's a second piece that also relates to from the Big Blue Bus episode about 8 years ago or so. Those council members who did agree with AIDS Project Los Angeles and wanted to help resolve this, they had another problem. And the other problem was the city attorney, okay? And the approach was basic, and so let me be concise about this. Okay, so the issue with the city attorney was, listen, AIDS Project Los Angeles, listen, Craig Miller, or even listen, Manat Law Firm, and a First Amendment attorney that we, you know, schlepped into City Hall on an occasion or 2 to help us make the case. We have a really good, and even if we don't think we have a really good, we have a really central lawyer in our city, and that central lawyer is called the city attorney. Okay, so AIDS Project Los Angeles, AIDS Walk Los Angeles, Craig Miller, whoever, you need to understand that Ms. Moutry, she moves at her own pace, okay? And it is really counterproductive for us as council members to really try and, you know, weigh in much on that pace. Now, don't get us wrong. We're with you on the issue, AIDS Project Los Angeles. And by the way, they weren't BSing us. They were. Okay. We're with you on the issue. But now on this issue of like, you want us to like kind of urge along or sort of kind of direct the timing and priority with which this issue is addressed by the city attorney, that's just too problematic. That was essentially what council members who were on our side on this issue conveyed to us. Okay. Well, that might be a good argument for an elected city attorney. Okay. By the way, the first advertisement I ever ran in my hometown where I've lived for 38 years now, the first advertorial or advocacy thing I did was a full-page ad in the Santa Monica Daily Press, and its headline was this: "What does it mean to be mayor of Santa Monica?" Okay, so I ran that ad 8 years ago. I think the question is being answered better today by Sue Himmelrich than it has been answered at any time in those 8 years but I still don't think it's a good enough answer. Okay. Sue Himmelrich is a very good mayor. Sue Himmelrich is not sufficiently empowered by the structure of our city government to have all that she has to offer, all her innovation, all her smarts, all her consistency with the values of this community. She has so much that she could bring as mayor, but structurally, she'll only be able to bring a fraction of it. So, a couple things regarding 531, and I'll be super brief. And John, feel free to push me along on super briefness if I need help with that. Sometimes I do. So two quick things on 531, and then I will stop, I promise. Well, one is, I believe that the mayor at the time of 531 acted in ways that were discordant with the majority's sentiment and views of the people of Santa Monica. That's a highly debatable position I'm articulating, okay, and I acknowledge it as such. But I will just also say that I believe if the mayor were elected by the voters of the city, the mayor who was mayor at the time of 531 would have behaved differently, better, by being more tuned into how residents are feeling about this than how a given union is feeling about it, or how various administrative leaders within the city are feeling about it, and the politics that council members need to maintain in terms of their relationship, again, with those city leaders. It would be a better situation if the mayor was elected and we would have had a better mayor. Even if it was the same mayor, I believe we would have had a better mayor if that mayor were popularly elected by the public. Last example. And this example relates to one former council member who I like and one current council member who I like. Okay. And one of the examples occurred at this Democratic Club during the candidates debate. And during that debate, as some of you may recall, a view was expressed by one of the incumbent candidates, a very respect-worthy one by the name of Kirsten McGowan. And Kirsten, at one point in the debate, kind of even interrupted or intervened, sort of with a comment to the effect of, there were questions being posed about the council members' feelings, attitudes, views about the then police chief. And quite naturally, questions about the council members' sentiments about the then police chief, I'm sorry, I'm repeating myself, were brought up in a Democratic Club debate. There should be nothing surprising about that, okay? But the suggestion from Kirsten was, and I think it was in part a courtesy to those council members that had opposition, was, I'm really not sure, in fact, I think it's not appropriate for the incumbent council members to, in this debate, offer comments or critiques or views about the sitting police chief. And she had various reasons for that had to do with, fiduciary duty, HR issues, and things such as that. Kirsten McGowan is not a political foe of mine. Okay, I just want to make that clear. Kirsten McGowan, Kirsten McGowan is very respectful, attentive, and anytime that I've wanted to talk with her, she has made herself available. Okay, so there's no grudge to this comment, okay? But I do think it speaks to a central policy question, which I would just kind of react to as, really? 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 So in the heat of an election, after an incredible, visible, disastrous performance by our police department, that the view of respect-worthy council members is, we're really not sure that we should, in the context of this campaign or at this time, express our views as to the performance of the police chief. Okay, so I like and admire Kirsten. This is not a slam on Kirsten. But I think it's a core point. If we can't have a discussion during an election campaign with council members who are seeking to re-earn our neighbors' votes about how the sitting police chief performed and what we might want to do about it after the most visible, disastrous underperformance of that chief and that department, and it is suggested by very credible and respect-worthy city leader like Kirsten McGowan, that may not be an appropriate discussion during an election campaign, which obviously then begs the question, then when is it? When is it? When is it an appropriate time for constituents to be able to hear from their council members on a key issue like that? That's a real breakdown in democratic processes. And I think part of it probably could be clarified even within the existing governmental structure that we have in the city. But I also think it speaks to just a need to change the system. Last point. A former council member who also is not a political opponent of mine, who I also like a lot, who also has, every time I asked to speak with him, he made himself available. And more than half the time agreed with me. And that's Ted Winter. In a public setting during election time, Ted made a comment with regards to the police chief and the council's view of the performance of the police chief. And I wouldn't quote Ted if this was a private conversation, but it wasn't. And he said, well, I think you can read between the lines. And my response, of course, was, yes, Ted, I believe we can too, but we shouldn't have to. There's a lot of good people in this city, and I'm really sorry for the role that I have played, and I know I have, in being less congenial, less affable, and at times more rude than I really should be, or that a Santa Monican really should be, or that somebody trying to make a difference in their city really should be. And I don't like that fact, and I do take responsibility for it. And I also recognize that all of us, Ted, Kirsten, even Kevin and Glenn, they were in a tough spot, and they were acting as public servants. So I don't want to overlook that fact. But I don't think it was a particularly good act. And I think part of the problem is the way our city government is structured. And with that, I'll stop. Thank you for all your patience. Sorry for rambling a bit. And thank you so much for the invitation.
Thanks, Craig. And I want to go straight to Kristen, who has her hand up.
Hey, Craig. Hey,
Hi,
everybody.
Kristen.
Sorry, I have to make my kids breakfast. So Craig, I appreciate you.
Thank you.
It's always fun. I am still going to stand by what I said back then. I'd
Okay.
probably say the same thing again today.
Okay.
And the last thing I'm going to say for everyone is it's Kristen.
I'm so sorry.
It's okay.
I'm really sorry.
It's okay. It's okay. No worries. But I appreciate you, and I think a lot of I think everything you said has value, whether I agree or disagree with some of it. So thank you.
Thank you. I'm going to just say thank you, Mayor Pro Tem, so I don't, because I'm really good at pronouncing that.
So Craig, I think if I understand, because there's some questions in the chat.
Sure.
You mentioned a bunch of interactions where the council members, were basically limited by the structure of the current government. Is that how you would characterize a lot of that stuff?
Yes, or I would say it more, or yes, but maybe even more precisely. The structure tends to make it harder for council members to be more in tune with constituents than they are with the administrative class in City Hall. That said, I don't want to overstate the case. It's not impossible. It's not impossible, even with the current city structure. It's not impossible. But I think that good people like our Mayor Pro Tem and like Ted the structure and the system may have made them and may still make them less inclined to be more resident leaning and more inclined to be more administrative class leaning than would be the case if we had a better structure. So I don't think the structure is non-overcomable. It's just, we got to be realistic. These are part-time council members. How much can we expect from them, for heaven's sakes?
Sure. And so do you think that, so effectively the idea being you would eliminate the position of city manager and have a mayor that actually has autonomy to make decisions that currently the city manager makes? I guess I just want to get I understand the issues that you brought up about specific council members, but just to get the core idea of it out there for people, is that how it would work for you?
I'm neither smart enough nor studied enough to actually make comments specifically on, okay, so if there's a citywide elected mayor, which I'm very strongly support, should there also be a city manager? Or if so, what's the relationship between that city manager, and does that turn into more like a chief executive officer of the city? I apologize. I'd say it's all interesting stuff. I'm not sure what the right answer is on that piece of it.
Great. And another question that came up in the comments that I also have heard from other parts of the state where there was a movement to have a directly elected mayor. And some people were actually saying that it's actually could be a bad thing, because then you're concentrating power in one elected person who if instead of 7 people who have a vote, you're concentrating that power that the way that the president has a specific leadership position. And do you think that there could be a downside to having that concentration of power?
Yes, I think there could be, but I think there probably won't be, or in any case, it won't match the downsides of the current system. And an example I might cite would be, I remember during the Obamacare, the initial Obamacare debate, and that horrible black man that was going to force socialism upon all of us. And so here was the argument. It was, do you want to trust your healthcare to big government? And okay, well, I get that. Well, first of all, it's a good rhetorical argument. I don't think it's a terribly good argument, actually, intellectually, but it's a good rhetorical argument. And then I think a good response to that would be, well, no, that does sound a little grim and maybe a little scary. But on the other hand, so if I don't trust my healthcare to government, then who am I trusting it to? Oh, the insurance industry and structure as it exists in the United States. Okay, so I guess my point is, I'd rather take my chance with big government in my healthcare than the private insurance industry in America. And I would rather take my chance with a democratically elected citywide leader than an undemocratically elected, a non-elected, super powerful executive class within City Hall. There are risks to both. A strong executive class that's not terribly democratic, on any given Tuesday, I mean, even a stop clock is right twice a day. So I suppose that could work out. It hasn't worked out very well here. And I also suppose that a citywide mayor could then bring in issues of tremendous flow of money and so on and so forth, and it could turn really bad. Yeah, there are positive possibilities and negative possibilities of both. I would prefer to take my chance with the voters and even with the problematic influence of money and so forth in a citywide election, then continuing to take our chance with a very powerful, unelected, hard to make responsive by part-time council members, even when they're well-intentioned, administrative or executive class within City Hall. I think the current structure is the most dangerous, the least democratic, the least likely to reflect our community values, the least likely to engender an environment wherein, when a city makes a mistake, it actually has the capacity to say it. I mean, I like Garcetti reasonably well, but I really liked him a lot. In the aftermath of that lynching and his willingness to walk the way he did and into the crowds the way he did, and to meet with really angry Black clergy members, and to communicate with his city in a way that said, we know that things are not right in the way municipalities all over this country are managing their police departments. And I, Eric Garcetti, in the immediate aftermath of these disasters, recognize it and am willing to speak the truth about it, and actually then in fast track manner make some budgetary reforms and some other reforms. Why did Eric Garcetti behave that way? I think two reasons. One, I think he's a good man. Two, he's responsive to a Democratic electorate.
Great. Well, thanks, Craig. Are there any last questions for Craig? Otherwise, I think we'll be wrapping up here. Okay, great. So I want to thank Craig. Oh,
John, I think Dolly had a question.
Let's go to Dolly. We always have time for Dolly.
You're muted, Dolly.
Okay. Yeah, I'm sorry. I just can't let this end without having a say in it, because I have looked at this whole question of what form of municipal government works best. And each one has its pros and each one has its cons. So what you said at the end, Craig, is really it. It's where would you take the biggest risk? Well, I always go back to New England and the town hall, the original one. That's really what it's all about. It's about the citizens deciding on the issues and the actions that affect them. And we have, because of population size, we can't do that. We have to have representation. But that is basically the core. So in the end, it is the council members or whomever is this representatives of the individuals who have to be given enough power and enough ability as you point out, they can't really, if you're a part-timer, I mean, I right now, myself in my own life, don't have enough time to do anything right. So I mean, so I understand, and I'm on a commission, and I know some of the skeletons, and I have seen staff, and I have to be honest, really lie. And in fact, to one former council person who's been with us tonight, when that council person was really trying to be responsible in exercising the role of being a representative. And but I don't think that council member knew it was a lie. They couldn't really confront it. And so something passed that shouldn't have passed because it was based on fallacy. So the question is, it's a constant search, is how do we get this balance? Well, some communities actually pay their council members, a decent salary, if you want to call it, so that they can afford not to be part-time and really needing the staff now. So it's a search. I don't think we have answers, but we have to keep looking for how we go back to the New England format of the town hall and represent that. And it's constant. I look at Portland. Portland has a commission system of government where I don't know what they call themselves, commissioners. Each commissioner is an executive. They're elected, so they're representative, but they have executive power. Each commissioner has has maybe 3 areas they're responsible for. Like one of them has maybe public safety and 2 other major areas, and so forth. And you can see what's happening up there now, where there's something that isn't working with that because they can't turn around the problem they have. So all I want to say is this kind of discussion we're having is very healthy. And each of us has to think about, how do we strengthen the legislative function, and how do we provide the checks and balances?
Yeah, well, I sure appreciate your comment and your question, and I'll just offer one super brief suggestion. Well, an observation and a suggestion. The observation is, and this is not original, I'm not going to attribute it, but it's not an original thought of mine. It was said to me by a community leader, which was, Craig, have you ever noticed how much time the council members spend lavishing praise on the administrative staff, like before and after pretty much every presentation on anything? It's like, well, actually, I hadn't noticed that until you pointed it out. And again, these people work hard, and some of them, most of the time, do very good work. So I'm not anti-praise of staff. I run a company. I run an organization. I'm hip to the value of timely praise of staff. It reinforces good work. That said, there's some embedded information for us in what this community leader shared with me and what I believe to be what I've just shared with you. And the embedded information is the culture of the council catering to the executive staff and viewing them as their prime audience and their prime constituency. And again, praise is appropriate. Praise is good. If you do it too much, it becomes so inflated that it becomes meaningless. And I think the council has at times run that risk. But it's a real insight into culture and into the political dynamic.
Thanks, Craig. Let's give the last word to Patricia.
Okay, yeah, so back to the whole subject of the night, which was voting systems. In 1992, both Tony and I were in favor of district voting because at that time it was a progressive idea and it fit the demographics and dynamics of our community. Since then, it's no longer a progressive idea. Proportional representation or ranked voting or some way that gives populations, not just because of geographic identification, but any other kind of identification. It gives them the opportunity for full representation if you want to not use the at-large system. So I just wanted to add that it's not progressive here.
Thanks. Let me just clarify. I wasn't actually speaking tonight on the issue of district or not.
I wasn't speaking just to what you were saying. I was speaking to the topic of the evening, which I thought there was going to be some discussion of.
Got it. Thank you.
So that's a perfect opportunity to pivot to remind everybody that next month on May 26th, we're going to be discussing some of the issues, the very issues that Patricia just raised. We have a great speaker coming to talk about ranked choice voting, Sean Dugar, who's a member of the DNC. He just got elected as the only Black man on the California delegation to the DNC. And he's also running the information campaign for ranked choice voting in New York City, which is happening right now. So we have a really great speaker coming to talk about ranked choice, how we might apply it here. We have another great speaker talking about proportional representation and the multi-member districts. And also, like was mentioned earlier, or actually we have another one called approval voting. They just did this in St. Louis where you just vote for everybody you like, no matter how many check marks you want to give, and whoever has the most check marks gets elected. So we're going to hear about all these different ideas. This meeting was sort of about the structure of the government. Come back next month, part 2, we're going to talk about specifically ways of voting and how that may affect the outcomes as well. So I want to thank all of the guests, Craig, Mike, Oscar, Aura, all of the speakers who came to speak before that, Senator Allen, and thank you to everybody for sticking in through to the end, where we ended up with 46 people still on the line at 11 p.m. That's not bad. So thanks everybody for coming. This is a really important, even if you completely disagree with all the ideas that were shared here tonight, I found it to be really interesting to just dive into some of these topics and how, like I said, we can work on the democracy here in Santa Monica and create new interesting outcomes. Some of the ideas maybe are good. Some of the ideas maybe will retire after tonight. But it was really good. So thanks everybody for coming, and we'll see you next month.
Thanks, John.
Thank you. Thanks, John. Thanks, everyone.
Night.
Everyone.
Thank you.